opportunity, ask for your support of this legislation. But as always, we're always glad to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair Harris and Representative Delosier. Council, please provide a brief explanation of the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As Chairman Harris said, this bill expands the already existing limited access and clean slate limited access for sealing criminal records. The first portion of this is the petition for limited access under Section 9122.1, in which a court may currently grant a petition for certain low-level misdemeanors. There is a person has to be free from conviction for 10 years currently. This bill would reduce that period to 7. The bill would also expand eligibility for the limited access under that section to persons with a qualifying felony. Again, you'd have to have no conviction for 10 years. All restitution must be paid, fees must be paid before this could be granted. Qualifying felonies are limited to certain nonviolent felony offenses, which include things like criminal mischief, criminal trespass under some circumstances, some theft offenses and forgery offenses, as well as a human services code offense and drug act offenses. I would note that still the prosecutor gets notice and a chance to raise any objections to such petition under this bill. The second part of this bill is limited to the clean slate access. That does not require.
I'm actually not at work today, so I'm hanging out with my kids, so I can actually kind of be on stream and shoot shit a little bit.
Reduces the time within which a person has to be free from conviction from 10 down to 7 years, and from 10 down.
Still trying to track down when exactly they're supposed to hear these bills in Pennsylvania. So bear with me, guys, if I'm like switching screens and bouncing around.
Which is offense is defined as an offense under Section 13 of the Drug Act, or attempt.
I'm also trying to keep an eye on Alabama because I don't trust them not doing
with a
things
minimum
sneaky.
sentence of less than 30 months of imprisonment. The bill does add a small provision for employer immunity for when an individual voluntarily discloses criminal record. There are 2 amendments that we will. There are 4 amendments we'll go over to, I believe, and we will be moving to.
Thank you, Council. We will be going over 2 amendments, which are Amendment 414 and Amendment 415. But Council, you're in order on Amendment A00373.
A0373 clarifies that when counting prior offenses, convictions for 2 or more
Chamber, what's
offenses
up, brother
are
man?
deemed to be 1 conviction when they're under 1 docket number and share the same.
Kurt, what's
offense
happening,
record.
brother?
Thank you, Council.
Yeah. Oh, I'm home
Motion to
today with
adopt
sick
Amendment
kids, so I'm chilling out. We're gonna work on some
A00373
guns
by
in a little bit.
Representative
Just some simple stuff. While we're trying
Howard,
to keep an eye
seconded
on
by
these dickheads.
Representative Sanchez. I'll get you next time. Sanchez. Are there any questions or comments on the amendment? Representative Bonner.
Doughboy right there, man. I've seen a couple things with him. He pisses me off to no end. I know he pisses off
Thank you,
now
Mr.
Mike
Chairman.
because I think Mike's up there
This may
with
not
this
be quite the
jackass.
appropriate time to ask this question, but I'm just trying to do my math and understand how the charges may interrelate. So a felony 3 is the highest grade eligible.
Representative Bonner, it's a little difficult to hear you. Is the mic on, or if there's
Yes,
a
it
way
is
to move
on.
it closer? Okay.
Any better?
I could hear that, but
Okay,
that's,
I'm sorry.
sorry.
So a felony 3 is the highest grade that would be eligible for relief.
I think it is, yes. Well, putting aside the grading of the Drug Act, yes.
Yes. So if we have an individual who has committed several separate offenses, but we have them all at the same docket number, they could receive a sentence more than 7 to 10 years. When would be the earliest be that they could seek relief under the act? So if we have a gentleman who has 3 felony 3s, obviously committed on different dates, but they're consolidated at one particular term and number. could they be seeking relief under the act prior to the completion of that sentence if in fact they have gone 7 years since they entered that plea without committing another offense?
They have to be free of conviction for a certain period of years, currently 10 years.
Yes. So if they receive a sentence, for example, of 7.5 to 15 at a consolidated number, now they're in prison, they're free from a conviction for 10 years because they're in prison and frankly, they can't commit it. Would they be eligible, though, to seek relief under the act?
Yeah, dude. PA's got some fucking all right places just like we all do where it's just shit. So
they would not be able to under 9121 because of the offenses.
If they were,
The sentence was too long.
what's the sentence limit?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
They could.
oh, I'll take a drag. Hopefully I'll stay half-ass on
They
screen.
could conceivably, if it fell within the certain offenses, seek relief under the limited access provisions,
Right.
depending on what the offense is. And
Whoa,
they would have to
sorry.
meet all the other
Criteria.
required criteria.
Okay.
Right.
My second question is, with the number of bomb threats that have been directed against our institutions, including our schools, has there been any discussion or thought that we should eliminate terroristic threats from this particular legislation?
I think terroristic threats is an exception in this
It's
bill.
an exception.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. I appreciate your answers.
Are there any other questions or comments on the amendment? Seeing none, are there any negative votes on the amendment? Seeing none, the secretary could record unanimous support for the amendment. Council, you are in order on Amendment A00413.
A0413 removes specific reference to the Department of State from language relating to exceptions to the clean slate for removal of certain information to verify information provided by a candidate for public office. I'm sorry. And it also extends the effective date from 60 to 180 days.
Is there a motion to adopt Amendment A00413 made by Representative Kaufman, seconded by Representative Donahue? Are there any questions or comments on the amendment? Seeing none, are there any negative votes on the amendment? Seeing none, if the secretary could please record unanimous support for Amendment A00413. I love this. This is the way meetings should be. The amendment is adopted. We're motion to report out House Bill 689 as amended by Representative Kaufman, seconded by Representative Pielli. Any questions or comments on the bill as amended? Representative Hohenstein.
I just want to make the very brief statement that I appreciate our Appropriations Chair and Representative Delosier, all of your work on this. And I know directly from constituents in my district, there are people who will be helped by this and be able to get on with their lives after having served their time, and it'll give them the opportunity to become the citizens that we want everyone to be. So thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions? Chairman Kaufman.
Yeah, I want to thank the sponsors of this bill. There's been a lot of give and take over the last few years to get to the point where it is today. Stakeholder meetings and amendments, and I appreciate the hard work of the sponsors and the stakeholders who have been part of this. And it is good to have a bipartisan meeting.
Oh, shit.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to echo the Chairman's comments regarding the bipartisan nature of
Sam,
working on
what's going on,
difficult
brother?
issues
I'm
like
doing
this. It makes
good.
it a lot easier
Tired.
to bring them up
Hanging out with
when
my
there is
boy
agreement.
today.
And
He's not
it
feeling
didn't just
good,
happen.
so
It was a
we're
lot of
chilling
hard work
out.
by the both of you. So thank you for that.
Streaming
And I do
some of
want to
this
thank
shit.
the Chairman for having a hearing on this issue last session because it was a good opportunity to hear from folks. I hope all legislation is like this, but I know it won't be. But are there? Actually, I'm going to do a roll call. If the secretary could call a roll.
Chairman Briggs,
Yes.
Representatives Donahue, Hanbidge,
Designation, yes.
Hohenstein, Howard,
Yes.
Kincaid,
Yes.
Mays,
Designation, yes.
Pielli, Rab,
Designation, yes.
Sanchez, Schusterman,
Designation, yes.
Warren,
Designation, yes.
Chairman Kaufman,
Yes.
Representatives Bonner, Ecker, Ham, Ledbetter,
By designation, yes.
Owlett, Rigby, Rowe,
By designation, yes.
Schemmel. Mr. Chairman, House Bill 689 as amended passes unanimously.
I didn't have my mic.
Oh. Ooh. All right, they go completely out of session. Let's see what else these douchebags are doing. Because the entire house was supposed to be going today and considering these bills. I'm not looking for the fucking committees, you jackasses. I'm looking for the whole house meeting. I see so shit. Oh, fuck, Sam. Apparently, me and you both got to get feeling better shit. I feel like I got my ass whipped. Where is... Oh, hell, we'll come over here. Let's see what Alabama's talking about right now.
Okay, I think the last bill on the agenda we have today is SB 245. When we talk about monstrosity of a bill, this may get the award this year. It's 921. Senator Gavan, I'll let you take off.
So, yeah, I was laughing when Cam referred to having an insomnia bill. I'm like, I got your insomnia bill here. And I will make this confession. I have not read this bill. This is an ALI bill. I dropped it. There is an issue on when it would start because this would change the way we deal with nonprofits. And
That's what we just watched.
Qualifying offense is defined as an offense under Section 13 of the Drug Act or attempt, conspiracy, or solicitation related to.
I'm personally amenable to that. Don't have the amendment right now. They're asking for 6 more months to be able to digest all this, assuming that we do pass it. I see a question across the way with,
No, this is not a question. It's just
Senator Cole-Masson.
a recommendation or an ask if you could do us like a little cheat sheet summary of exactly what, because
there is a cheat sheet. And what legislative day are we on?
17 just today, I believe.
House will reconvene at 11 o'clock.
I think this has already
today.
passed the House. So why don't we, to deal with the amendment, let me get a chance to get the cheat sheet to the members? Why don't we carry this over to next
you.
week?
thank you.
Very well. I think that's a
flying
wise
fuck?
thing to do.
They do have a cheat sheet. I'm sorry I didn't bring it.
I'm gonna say this though. So there are bills that come through up here, and I shouldn't
Not
say this,
showing
but
a
I'm gonna say
special
there are bills that come up
calendar,
here
but
that
that's not what was on there.
you know, you
fucking
skim
just
through
a
and you
little
think
bit
you
ago.
understand. There are bills that you really spend a whole lot of time on, and maybe you do and maybe you don't. And quite honestly, I could read this from now until Christmas time, and I'm not sure I'd understand every bits and piece of it. So I appreciate your willingness to work on it, to bring it, to make sure that it does what it needs to do, or
Why do
what
I
we're
get
trying
the
to
idea
accomplish
of
here. So,
fucking
all right. Any opposition to carrying that bill over?
PA's
Hearing
doing
none,
some
we'll carry that
shady
bill
shit.
over. I believe that we have gotten through the agenda for the day.
Hey.
Yes, we did handle 76. So that being said, members, the meeting's adjourned. Thanks so much.
Yeah, why did I get the idea that fucking Pennsylvania House is pulling some shady shit? Where's their damn fucking douchebags? Oh, let me do this. Let me escape out of this. Let me open up their regular calendar. All right, let's share this for a sec. Let me walk down this. These were some of the bills. Those were the tabled bills. So this is what they're supposed to hit today. Act amending Title 18, Pennsylvania Consolidated. Firearms and other dangerous articles, providing for report of loss or theft, imposing penalties. Firearms, dangerous articles, repealing provisions related to sale or transfer of firearms. I think that is their universal background check bullshit. Let's see. What do we got? Firearms, other dangerous articles, further providing for locking. So this is their safe storage bill. Bunch of douchebags. So statutes, firearms, and other dangerous articles, further providing for persons not to possess, use, manufacture, control, sell firearms, and for abandonment of firearms, weapons, and ammunition in community and municipal courts. So let's see what the fuck they say about that bill. Is the Senate doing it? I don't think the Senate's doing anything with firearms today. But the House definitely is supposed to. So we are going to hang out and see just what the hell Pennsylvania pulls today. 500, what's going on, brother man? Gabber, what's happening, brother? What's happening? Oh shit. So we'll try to keep an eye on them and see kind of crazy crap they're gonna pull. Mike McClune sends me updates on what's going on in PA, so he sent me an email a couple days ago, and then sent me an email I think last night, wanting to keep an eye on this shit. Let me see. So we're gonna look at a few things. North Carolina still hasn't went into session yet. Clover Tax got a show running right now. Okay. North Carolina ain't talking anything we really want to listen to. Looking at something else, trying to see. And so far, I was listening to some of the stuff. Some cases that are going on right now. It doesn't look like anything has. Pennsylvania House gets rolling, we'll be rocking and rolling. But I was trying to listen to some other stuff and see whether there's some other cases coming in, but there's not. Doesn't look like it anyway. So let me see. What you got, Warsaw? Oh, this is Commerce Committee. I don't think the Commerce Committee really had anything going on half-assed today. Judiciary Committee's already out. Where was I at? Where was I at? I was somewhere. I swear to God I was. Dude, no one gives a fuck what you think at this point.
In a world full of fakes, how to avoid buying fake items that look just like the real thing? Are you getting faked over? Experts say it's all in the details.
Shut
Senator
up.
Wyden, and it's no secret to anybody that you and I have prioritized mental health delivery in America. In the last Congress, we got a number of major initiatives through and signed into law, but there are a number of major initiatives that, such as this one, that we still have work to do on. And I appreciate the opportunity to work with you on it. Last Congress, as I said, we came together to enact dozens of bipartisan policies to expand access to mental health care services. These reforms will increase the number of providers participating in Medicare and allow patients to receive care in more convenient locations, including through telehealth. However, in order for these improvements to achieve their potential, patients need accurate and up-to-date information on their health care options. I've long championed Medicare Advantage for its ability to offer patients choice and control over their health care. Through robust competition and innovative benefit offerings, Medicare Advantage provides consumer-focused health coverage to millions of Americans. As enrollment continues to grow, improving the accuracy of provider directories could further strengthen Medicare Advantage. The patient-provider relationship is the foundation of the healthcare system. Whether a patient
I'm
is
pretty
suffering
sure
a
this is
mental
going to
health
be old
crisis or
Chucky
just
Schumer
received a
speaking on the
troubling
fucking Senate
diagnosis,
floor.
directories should serve as crucial tools to help seniors across the country. While we work to better
who literally can't get food on their own much of the time and rely on others bringing it to them. They would be on the chopping block if the GOP has its way. Deprive seniors who can't leave their homes of food? What is that all about? So that some very wealthy multi-billionaires don't have to pay any taxes? It's outrageous. Here's another one. The Republican Default on America Act would eliminate 30,000 law enforcement jobs across the country. You know what that means? Gun violence will get even worse. Our neighborhoods will become less safe. Border security would be deprived of billions in crucial resources. The war
Man,
on
this guy is
opioids
such a
would
fucking
decline,
sleaze.
and more addictions, crimes, and others from opioid use would go up. What is that all about? Once again, the hard right, totally enthralled by the very wealthy few who are so greedy they don't want to pay any taxes, say cut things like this. Cut law
This guy
enforcement,
is worth
cut means
fucking
on
probably
roads.
millions of dollars. You know his damn
Default on
CPA is
America
working
Act
overtime
would
trying to get him
shamefully
out of
attack
paying
our nation's
taxes.
veterans.
And he's going to get up there and accuse
Hurting
everybody else not
80,000
wanting to pay
VA
taxes.
jobs, leaving our nation's heroes without the care they've earned throughout a lifetime of service. These are just three of many, but eliminate Meals on Wheels, greatly hurt our efforts at law enforcement and safety by dramatically cutting, defunding police, greatly tying the hands of the VA so that veterans would get worse health care and they'd have to wait even longer. This is what
Dude, this jackass would run over a veteran in a damn
Default on
tank
America
if he
bill
knew he
does.
could pass some of his socialist
That's why
fucking
it's dead
bills.
on arrival. Not for some political or ideological reason, but it would do such harm. And when you wonder about the motivation of the Republicans, it's ultimately is this, these right-wing Republicans. Listen to the greedy few, the powerful greedy few who don't want to pay any taxes or want to have taxes reduced. Some of them even called for eliminating the income tax. And finally, the Default on America Act is chock full of totally irrelevant hard right goodies that would deregulate fossil fuels, reward corporate greed, shower the ultra-rich with tax giveaways, and impose cruel and unpopular work requirements on vulnerable families. So whether it's kicking seniors to the curb, cutting law enforcement jobs, or abandoning our veterans, everything about the Default on America Act reeks of MAGA
Hey,
extremism.
man, don't call Schumer a snake. That's giving
So,
snakes a bad
no
name. I
wonder the
like snakes.
Republicans
This
did
is
it in
a
secret.
fucking sleazeball.
It's no wonder that they didn't want to do what they promised to do, have hearings, have witnesses,
What
have
you doing, boy?
bipartisan discussion and amendments. But if Republicans won't
What you
level
want?
with the American people about their terrible bill, Senate Democrats are going to do it
You want?
for them. Tomorrow, the Senate Budget Committee holds a hearing on how Default on America Act would weaken the economy.
623, what's
and
up, brother,
slash
man?
hundreds of thousands of jobs. I want to thank Chairman Whitehouse and all the members of the committee for doing the important work of bringing this bill to the public eye because the American people deserve better. Incredibly, Mr. President, incredibly, tomorrow's hearing will be the very first hearing in either house that actually looks at what the Default on America Act does. Amazing. This huge bill that
Yes,
affects
well,
almost every
that's
aspect
a
of American
sleazeball.
life. They haven't had one hearing on the issues they are doing. But we're going to start doing it. And that hearing will be the first, but there will be many others. And as Democrats shine a light on how unserious and extreme the Republican Default on America Act is, our view about the path forward remains the same. Can't choose the Default on America Act, must avoid the horrors of default, pass a clean bipartisan bill to avert default. Now, later today, I will join my colleagues and committee chairs at a press conference to talk about the next steps in the Senate's effort to outcompete the Chinese government and preserve America's global leadership in the 21st century. The Democratic-led Senate has done some important bipartisan work to outcompete the Chinese Communist Party in the last few years. The infrastructure, chips and science, and the omnibus bill all did some in that regard. But we all know we can't stop there. We have to build on this progress. This work is critical to our national security. It won't be enough to outcompete the Xi regime in any single area. We must be ready to compete with all of them on all these fronts. And that will require comprehensive and bipartisan legislation. We must not aid and abet the Chinese government's development of advanced technologies like microchips, 5G, AI, quantum computing, and more that will shape the course of this century. We must limit investment capital from flowing to the Xi regime, the Chinese government, and prevent them from taking advantage of America's critical assets. We must continue in investing in our workforce and other key technology areas that drive American innovation. And we must strengthen our economic and military alliances and partnerships around the world to constrain Chinese potential aggression. The Chinese government is not constraining itself in its pursuit to dominate the 21st century. And if we in America,
Yeah, they know they got a weak ass American president. Of course, they ain't restraining themselves.
Would have serious consequences for the
Little
world's
fucking rocket man went and started going wild as soon as damn Biden got elected.
Leadership to governments opposed to democracy and individual liberty. We cannot let authoritarianism call the shots in the 21st century. So that's why this bipartisan effort in the Senate will be so important. The Senate has already shown that both sides are capable of working together on this most important issue, and I thank my colleagues who will join me at our press conference later this afternoon. Finally, on Senate business, it's going to be another busy day here on the Senate floor. Later this morning, the Senate will vote on the confirmation of Aurelia Merchant, whom I was proud to recommend.
Yeah,
to
G2,
President
cool
Biden
deal,
to
man.
serve as district judge for the Eastern District of New York.
Matter of fact, I got
We'll
to
also
do some
advance the nomination of two more terrific
painting on another. I
nominees,
think I got
Wesley
one
Shue
more to send
serve
out.
as the district judge
I
for
got to finish it
California,
up today.
and LaShonda Hunt to serve as district judge for Illinois. By the end of this week, the Senate will have moved forward with one circuit court judge, Anthony Johnstone, and as many as 5 new district court judges. And the Senate will continue doing the important work of ensuring the federal bench is filled with excellent, mainstream, and highly qualified judges in the weeks and months to come. I yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call a roll.
Ms. Baldwin.
John Crump just posted up some news.
Family. Now, why do I
Let's see what
raise
this
this
douchebag's talking about.
to tell you, I think, a fascinating and important story. I do it because it's a political issue. You just heard the Republican leader of the Senate come forward and tell us that he supports the proposal by the House Republicans on budget cuts. Do you know what the House Republican budget does to medical research at the NIH? Let me read it to you. They
It'll probably
propose
cut funding
ending
for the next plague. That's
bipartisan
what
commitment to
cutting
the
their
National
funding will
Institute of
probably
Health
do.
by cutting more than $10 billion in 2024. That's 25% of the budget for medical research, and more than $100 billion over the next 10 years. That will shutter hundreds of labs across the country, lead to fewer drugs being developed for cancer, diabetes, serious mental illness, and other devastating conditions. It will decimate American biotechnology, innovation, and economic growth.
It will
Sadly,
absolutely
it will
decimate
allow
our
China
ability to
become the
make the
global
next
leader
virus to
in
spread around the
biomedical
world and give
R&D.
us the fucking
So
control
when
we
we
need.
talk about the budget here and budget cuts, and they say we're just going to cut 10 billion, we got to step back and say, but what does that do for medical research in America? We take a step backwards. The hard bipartisan work that brought us to $40 billion is
Yeah,
wiped away
dude.
overnight.
Gabber, you ain't wrong there.
Researchers like those at Northwestern may lose heart and worry whether or not there's enough money to continue their research projects and innovation. And what will we lose in terms of the quality of life?
Yeah, I'm tired.
We lose the opportunity to come up with
ADR,
cures that
what's
people
up, brother
count on.
man?
That's why this means so much to me. It's a small part of the cut that's been proposed by the Republicans in the House, but it's a part that troubles me the most.
Dude, I got
We've got to keep our
I'm not
commitment to
at my
medical
place
research
right now. I've
for the
got
good of this
that one
nation
big
and for the families that
like
count
the
on us
Spartan
to make
helmet
certain
cut.
we come up with new cures.
We
We are
it's just
blessed
painted
in
a
America
gold
to have
color
the
right
best
now,
researchers
but
on
it may be
earth.
bigger than what
We've
you
taken
want.
over any other
'cause,
country, and most
yeah,
Americans
I'm gonna
will.
have to go in and do
But are
some
we going to
editing on
stand
that
by
thing
them?
to try to
Or are we
cut
going
it
to
any
make the deep
smaller.
cuts in areas like medical research as part of this political debate?
Next time I'm streaming at the house, which might
Mr.
be later
President, I ask
tonight, actually.
permission to speak on a
I'll pull that cut out.
that it be placed in a separate part of the record.
Without objection.
And
Mr. President, you were there yesterday.
kind of show it
The Senate
off.
Judiciary Committee met. I chair that committee, and we had a strong turnout of Democrats and Republicans to consider an issue which everyone's read about or heard about over the last several weeks, and that is the ethical standards applied at the highest court in the land, the United States
There
Supreme
we
Court.
go. Keep
across
on
the street.
attacking that court. They
We've
want
all
to
read the
attack that
news
court so
stories that
bad they
led to
can't
this
stand
hearing.
it.
Questions raised about one particular justice, but not him alone, in terms of gifts that they've received and whether it influences their decision-making on the court. That is basic and fundamental. If you think the fix is in on a court, you don't have much respect for their
Well, if you
operation.
had judges that
So the
would just
question is,
follow
what's
the
going on in the Supreme
Constitution, you
Court?
wouldn't be able to
And as
bribe
it
them because
turns
all
out,
they'd
as
be
you
able to
well
do is read the
know,
Constitution
we
and
have
say,
ethical
"Oh shit,
standards
shall
all
not be
across the federal
infringed."
government
Ah,
that
guess
apply
what?
to
We
the
can't
members
do
of the
that.
Senate and the House, the executive branch, and to all of the courts below the Supreme Court in terms of financial disclosure and basic rules of the road of what you can do and what you can't do. For example, there's a basic standard that is used for gifts
Keep
for
warning
members
people,
of the
these
Senate
motherfuckers
and
have
House
put over
that puts a
100
limit of
judges on
$50
district
on the
courts
value of any
already.
gift. I have returned gifts given to me, which I thought exceeded that value. I'm sure the presiding officer has as well. But that's our standard. There's no such standard, as best we can understand, when it comes to the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land. So it turns out the highest court in the land has some of the lowest ethical standards. Why? Well, when this came to light in the news articles about Justice Thomas, I wrote to the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, John Roberts, and invited him to come to the hearing yesterday to tell this side of the story. What is the Supreme Court doing when it comes to ethical standards? They don't play by the same rules as all the other courts in America. What are their standards? Well, the Chief Justice declined my invitation and sent along some documents to indicate what he thinks are the rules of the road for ethics in the Supreme Court now. They were interesting, but unfortunately, they revealed that the standards at the highest court in the land are not even equal to the standards at all the other federal courts. So we had a hearing yesterday on the subject, and we invited witnesses from the Republican side and the Democratic side to comment on the current state of affairs. If the Chief Justice couldn't appear or would not appear, we went forward with the investigation, which is our responsibility under the law. Now, asking a justice of the Supreme Court to come and testify before a congressional committee is not unusual. 92 appearances have been made by justices on the Supreme Court since 1960 before the committees of Congress. But yesterday, the Chief Justice, nor any other member of the justice on the Supreme Court appeared before us. So what we found was a surprise to me. I thought there would be some bipartisanship to this because in not too distant past, 2 senators on the committee had crafted an ethics bill on the disclosure of stock holdings, sent it not only to the president to sign, but it was embraced as well by the Supreme Court. Bipartisan, thoughtful measure for sure. But yesterday, I'm afraid things were very partisan. First, there was a question as to whether or not this was an attempt to attack the conservative members of the Supreme Court by raising ethical questions.
That's
I tried
exactly
to make
what
a
it
point
was.
several times that the first letter that I sent to a Chief Justice, this Chief Justice, on the issue of code of ethics for the Supreme Court, I delivered on February the 13th, 2012, during the Obama administration. So this was not some newfound interest. I've been working on it for years. My colleague,
You're
Senator
full of
Sheldon
shit.
Whitehouse, also has dedicated
No,
a
it's
major
not
part
because
of
he didn't
his
send the
Senate
letter.
career
It's reasoning.
to this issue of ethical standards before the Supreme Court. So the notion that we just invented this because of unhappiness with a recent court decision just doesn't hold up. Many of us have been working on this issue for years before any of these decisions were handed down. There was also an argument that Congress has no authority to establish standards for the Supreme Court. As I mentioned earlier, when we had the stock disclosure law passed last year, it was embraced by the court. The court goes through some form of financial disclosure based on a law passed in 1978. And by and large, there are many ways that the Congress interfaces with the Supreme Court, not the least of which is its budget. So we're in constant communication with the court and its operation. I believe that we clearly have the authority to establish ethical standards in law for the Supreme Court. The Republicans, to a person, disagreed with it. We also had an argument made that somehow we had singled out Clarence Thomas, a justice on the Supreme Court, and decided that he was going to be persecuted by this type of inquiry. Well, let me say the facts that were disclosed about his gift taking from a Texas billionaire were extraordinary. I think they were a surprise to most people. Justice Thomas has not denied the fact that he took hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of vacations, yacht trips to Indonesia, private aircraft from this Texas billionaire. He dismissed it and said that it was personal hospitality. Personal hospitality does not include transportation. And of course, this included a lot of the most luxurious transportation imaginable that the justice received. So to say that this was acceptable conduct, it clearly was to the Republicans yesterday, but I think most Americans want to know a little bit more about the relationship that would lead a justice to take hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of trip, not to mention that the same billionaire bought his mother's home and allowed her to live there afterwards. And so that was worth at least $140,000 to the benefit of the justice's family again. There were questions raised throughout as to why we would pick on one conservative justice. I will tell you the disclosures that have come out since the Thomas article about the gifts he's received from the Texas billionaire have included many members of the court, certainly those who wouldn't be put in the conservative category. Questions have been raised. Questions are raised about members of Congress all the time, and they should be. I know each year when I disclose my taxes and my net worth in detail, somebody's going to call with a question. Explain this item to me. Explain that item to me. That is part of the responsibility of public service. It's no fun, but it's part of the job. If you want to be a public figure, I think you owe it to the people to be assuring them at every step of the way that you're being honest about discharging your duties. So we haven't given up. When it comes to the Senate Judiciary Committee and the issue of ethics, we're far from finished. We had good testimony yesterday from witnesses that I think give us a basis for moving forward in this area. At the end of the day, we want to make sure that people, as skeptical as they are of politicians, they have every right to be, believe that the institutions, whether it's Congress or the Supreme Court or the President's office, are at least credible and trustworthy. Establishing a fundamental ethical standard that assures that fact is absolutely essential, and the Senate Judiciary Committee will continue that pursuit. Mr.
Dude,
President,
every
I
time
move
there's
for
a
and
so-called
suggest the evidence of the
conservative
court.
justice
Clerk will call a roll.
Ms. Baldwin.
that comes up to damn actually be up for the court, man, they tried to destroy him. Look what they did to Clarence Thomas in his original hearings. Look what they did to Kavanaugh. You know, they tried going after Amy Barrett on some shit, but they just couldn't touch her. They tried destroying damn Gorsuch. These people are fucking dirty ass. Oh, man. We're not far from the PA. Yeah. Pennsylvania House getting rolling.
Mr. President.
Republican whip.
Mr. President, is the Senate in a quorum call?
Yes.
I would ask unanimous consent the quorum call be suspended.
Without objection.
Mr. President, last week I came to the floor to talk about how the president's economic policies are failing to serve the lower and middle income Americans he claims are his priority. The president talks about wanting to give American families, quote, a little more breathing room, end quote. But his big government, big spending policies are taking away Americans' breathing room. His cash-strapped family struggling with the effects of the president's historic inflation crisis can attest. Well, today, Mr. President, I want to talk about another set of the president's policies that aren't serving Americans, and that's the president's energy policies. Since the day he took office, President Biden has pursued an agenda that is hostile to conventional sources of energy, namely oil and natural gas. He set the tone on his very first day in office when he canceled the Keystone XL pipeline, an environmentally responsible pipeline project that was already underway and that was to be paired with $1.7 billion in private investment in renewable energy to fully offset its operating emissions. He also almost immediately froze new oil and gas leases on federal land, sending a clear signal to oil and gas producers that his administration would be reluctant to work with them to increase American energy production. And he's continued along the same lines ever since. From raising taxes on conventional energy to proposing a rule that would effectively mandate that automakers only make electric vehicles beginning in the near future, the president's policies have targeted conventional energy. In March, the president announced that he would close off a substantial part of the Arctic to oil and gas development. And in the same week, his Environmental Protection Agency finalized a rule, its so-called Good Neighbor Rule, that threatens to close a number of fossil-fueled powered power plants. So why is all this a problem, Mr. President? After all, members of both parties support alternative energy technologies. Why are the president's efforts to shut down conventional energy production a problem? Well, Mr. President, the president's attacks on conventional energy are a problem because conventional energy still plays an essential role in providing a steady, reliable energy supply to American consumers. No matter how much the White House might wish it weren't the case, the technology to fully transition the United States to clean energy simply doesn't exist yet. And all the Green New Deal anti-conventional energy policies in the world can't change that basic fact. What the president's Green New Deal anti-conventional energy policies can do, however, is jeopardize our nation's energy supply and drive up prices for American consumers. Americans know the energy price hikes of the Biden administration all too well. From restricting oil and gas production to imposing tax hikes on conventional energy, President Biden's energy
PA House ought to be
policies
getting
have
started
driven
at
up
any time.
Americans' energy costs. But that will be nothing compared to what will happen if the president succeeds in choking off and drastically reducing conventional energy production.
Hagerizer, what's up,
Prices
my
will
brother?
soar. Blackouts, brownouts, and calls for energy rationing will become commonplace. And our economic and national security will be in jeopardy. We're not at the point yet where we're experiencing blackouts and brownouts on a regular basis. And so I get you're California, whose energy grid is known for being unreliable because of the state's over-reliance on renewables. But the president's policies could push us over the edge. Mr. President, in February, the PJM interconnection, which manages a substantial part of Eastern America's electric grid, released a report warning that fossil fuel plants are being forced to retire at a faster rate than new renewables can be brought online at a rate of roughly 2 to 1. In other words, Mr. President, we're rapidly approaching a situation where we simply don't have the ability to keep up with electricity demand. And as the report underscored, that situation is being driven by anti-conventional energy policies. The Wall Street Journal, which weighed in after the PJM report
As soon as
was
PA
released,
House
noted
gets
that,
rolling, I'm
and I
going to switch
quote,
over there.
most projected power plant retirements are policy driven, end quote. That's what the report
Just
says.
looking at Minnesota, I don't
In other
think they've
words,
got
power
any
plants aren't closing because they've reached the end of their operating life.
anything to do with
closing
gun
because of
control
policies
today. I don't
designed
think North
to
Carolina
discourage conventional
does.
energy. I've already mentioned the EPA's new Good Neighbor Rule, which could force
Alabama,
power
I don't
plants
think
in
it's doing
22 states
anything
to
else
close.
today on guns.
And then there are things like utility company environmental, social, and governance, or ESG policies, policies that utility companies can voluntarily adopt, but that this administration wants to mandate, which the PJM report highlights as a factor in plant closures. Not only do overreaching ESG policies force some of our most reliable energy facilities offline, these facilities are also being replaced with technologies like solar that are inherently intermittent and can't be dispatched in times of high demand. The Wall Street Journal notes that, and I quote, Illinois and New Jersey climate policies could reduce generation by 8,900 megawatts, end quote. That amount of energy would be enough to power over 7 million households. So in other words, Mr. President, policies that discourage conventional energy are already having an effect in threatening our nation's energy supply. And if the president continues to pursue these types of policies, his presidency
Alabama
may
at
be remembered
130's got
not
one
just for
bill
historic
going.
inflation crisis, but for setting off a long-term
I
energy
think
crisis
it's. I
caused
think
by an
that's to
unreliable and
increase.
insufficient energy supply. Mr. President, instead of trying to bring
Penalties for like
about
a
a
felon
clean
in
energy future
possession.
before we have the technology to get us there, the president should be pursuing an all-of-the-above energy policy. An energy policy
That's just
that
in the
embraces
Judiciary
full
Committee.
spectrum
They'll just
of
pat
available
backs
energy
and
sources, both renewable
fucking send that one on
and
down the line, more than
conventional.
likely.
And I'm a strong supporter of clean energy, like so many of my Republican colleagues. But unlike Democrats, Republicans recognize that our nation's not going to be fully transitioning
PA's
to
starting to hit the
100%
floor.
zero-emission energy anytime soon, no matter how much the administration would like it to. There are a lot of hurdles to be crossed before we can rely solely on clean energy. And so Republicans are committed
If I quit
to
yawning.
supporting both alternative energy and the responsible development and deployment of the conventional energy we need to keep our nation's energy grid reliable and Americans' energy
Yeah,
costs.
G23, you guys are getting it
For
coming and
evidence, you
going.
need look no further.
Only
than
every
the
time I
energy
look, I
rec
can't find any
legislation
hearings
recently
for this
passed by the
shit. They're just
Republican-led
shoving
House
it
of
through,
Representatives,
apparently.
which would advance both responsible conventional energy development and
They're hitting
clean
you guys
energy
without any
technologies.
lube up there right now.
Predictably, the
In
Senate
Washington
Democrat
State's the
leaders
same
declared
way.
this legislation, quote, dead
I
on
think
arrival
Washington State's
in the
got
United
about
States Senate.
everything as far as gun
But
laws
Democrats
passed
are so
that they,
beholden to the
all
radical
their
environmental
biggies
wing of
that
their
they
party
want.
that
So
anything that doesn't adhere
that's all
to their
going to
Green
let.
New
That's
Deal
all going to the
orthodoxy
courts.
isn't up for discussion. But Democrats' opposition is unfortunate, not just because this legislation would help ensure an adequate supply of conventional energy, but also because it would help advance alternative energy projects. Republicans' legislation would tackle
Yeah, we
permitting
need
delays, which
alternative
are a leading
projects,
impediment
but we
to energy
need
development, including
to
alternative energy development.
take care of the
Republicans'
the
legislation would also
reliable
actually help
fuels and
support the
sources of
electric car
energy we have
development
right
that
now,
Democrats are
and
so
then
committed to
when we find
by
another
enabling the
reliable source,
development
then switch.
of
You
critical
don't
mineral
fucking
resources
switch
here
when
at
the other
home.
source is unreliable.
The
It's
same
fucking
critical
idiotic.
minerals that are essential ingredients in electric car batteries. And, Mr. President, while I'm on the subject of cars, I will say that the president made one right decision on energy last Friday by approving the sale of E15 fuel for this summer. Americans saved $57 million last year thanks to summertime E15 sales. And with the war in Ukraine continuing to stress fuel markets, renewing this E15 permission will help drive down
We
the
wouldn't
expected
fucking be
summer
worried about
surge
fuel
in gas
markets if we
prices,
were
while at
still
the same
energy
time
independent.
benefiting our
Fucking
environment
people.
and offsetting production cuts from OPEC. But while I'm glad the president listened to calls from me and others to extend E15 sales through the summer, it's unfortunately one of just a handful of times where the president has opted for reliable and affordable energy instead of an unrealistic, anti-conventional energy policy. Mr. President, in all of the above energy policy, a policy that embraces both conventional and renewable energy sources is essential for keeping energy prices affordable, ensuring the reliability of our nation's energy supply, and keeping our nation secure. And if the president doesn't start encouraging conventional as well as renewable energy development, consumers and our country
Oh, fuck. I
are
gotta
going to
make
pay
some coffee.
a heavy
Smoke
price.
some more cigarettes or something.
The
Shit.
president has already ensured that he will be remembered for a historic inflation crisis. He should make sure that he isn't remembered as the instigator of a future energy crisis as well. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
All right. PA's
The
kicking
Senator
in.
Diaz be allowed to speak for up to
Arms will close the doors of the House. Prayer today will be offered by our colleague, Representative Lisa Borowski. Immediately after the prayer, we will recite the Pledge of Allegiance. Members and guests, please rise as able.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and good morning, colleagues. This legislature, like the chamber we occupy, is grand and beautiful. We are beautiful in our diversity and our desire to do what we believe is right for those we serve. We are at our best when we remain focused on serving the best interests of those who sent us here. Today, as we come together from across the state with our differing backgrounds
Oh, I
and
bet they will,
experiences,
G2.
may we continue to commit to our deliberations with
I
open
bet they
minds
will.
and open hearts. Love
Ain't
is
no doubt
patient,
about that.
love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
Figure they recite that all the time. To the republic, and then they turn around and go, our democracy. Figure they might get that fucking port one day.
Sergeants at arms will open the doors of the House. Members and guests, please take your seats. Without objection, the approval of the Journal of May 2nd, 2023 will be postponed until printed. Members, please take your seats. We have some very important guests to acknowledge. Members, please take your seats.
We'll go through all the pomp and circumstance for a little bit.
The House will come to order. Members, please take your seats so we can acknowledge our guests. In the gallery this morning, our colleague, Representative Stir, has brought to the House Our Lady of Lourdes Regional School Girls Basketball Team. These students qualified for the PIAA Class 1A
What's the over-under
State
since they're doing
Basketball
gun bills? They're going
Championship,
to have a
where
bunch
they
of
earned
moms
a
and
silver medal.
fat
Our
uglies
Lady of
standing
Lourdes,
around.
please stand and congratulations.
Yeah, G23. Every time I go to look, man, for anything
Our
going on in
colleague,
Oregon,
Representative Ledbetter, has
it's like a
brought up in the
wasteland. There's
gallery
nothing I
the
can find on
Southern
gun posters on
Columbia
it.
State Football Champions.
But I know they're pushing all
They
the shit.
earned the
Just can't find it.
2022 PIAA State Class AA Football Championship and the District 4 title. This is their sixth straight state title. Southern Columbia, please stand. Congratulations. Representative Dunbar has brought to the floor of the House, seated in the gallery, the Penn Trafford High School Rifle Team. They captured the school's first state championship by winning first place. Penn Trafford, please stand and congratulations.
Hallelujah. They're acknowledging something about guns, I guess.
The House will come to order. Sergeants at arms, please clear the aisles so we can acknowledge our special floor guests. Members, please take your seats. The House will come to order so we can acknowledge our very special guests who are here. Members, please take your conversations off the floor of the House. Thank you. We are truly delighted to have in our presence, seated in the rear of the House, the members of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, the first and the finest, who exemplify sisterhood and scholarship in all they do. And I must brag, they've been pouring out the affection for the last several weeks. And ladies, I'm so grateful for your example, and I'm personally grateful for your love. Please stand, members of Alpha Kappa Alpha. We are so delighted to have you here. Let me not neglect to say there's so many members of our caucus, our staff leadership members, who are members of this distinguished group, and we are grateful to have you. And one member of the group has been not only a member for a very long time, but recently turned 100 years old. Seated to the happy 100th birthday, even though it's past, we're so grateful. We, interestingly enough, have another distinguished member of Alpha Kappa Alpha who's here in her own right. Mrs. Tamara Abney is the Mrs. Pennsylvania for 2022. She's also the leading lady of the 19th Legislative District. Not only is she a tremendous mother to her two sons, Arius and Amir, but she also keeps her full-time business going while being the better half of our colleague, Representative Arian Abney. Mrs. Pennsylvania, please stand up. Congratulations. The House will be at ease.
The House is at ease. Damn, smoke another one. What you doing, Wubs? Come here. What's up here?
Chair recognizes Representative Daley, Chair of the Committee on Tourism and Economic and Recreational Development, who reports the following resolutions. House Resolution 27, reported as committed. Will the House agree to the report? It's agreed to. House Resolution 51, reported as committed. Will the House agree to the report? It's agreed to. House Resolution 52, reported as committed. Will the House agree to the report? It's agreed to. House Resolution 58, reported as committed. Will the House agree to the report? Agreed to. House Resolution 87, reported as committed. Will the House agree to the resolution? Agreed to. Chair recognizes Representative Massey, Chair of the Committee on Consumer Protection, Technology, and Utilities, who reports the following bill. House Bill 1028, reported as committed. Will the House agree to the bill? Agreed to. Chair is in receipt of information that Representative Abney has resigned the secretary position on the Insurance Committee. The chair appoints Representative Venkat as Secretary of the Insurance Committee. In the gallery, we are so happy to welcome to the floor of the Pennsylvania House this morning guests of our colleagues, Representatives Fiedler and Heffley. They're hosting students from across the Commonwealth who participate in after-school programs through the Pennsylvania statewide after-school youth development program. Please stand and
We're looking
welcome
for
to the floor of the
338,
House.
714, 731. House 1018.
Are there requests for leaves of absence? Chair recognizes the majority chair, who indicates there are none. Chair recognizes the minority chair, who indicates there are none. The chair is about to take the master roll call. Members will proceed to vote.
Zero.
Have all the members voted? Have all the members voted? The clerk will record the vote. 201 members having voted on the master roll call, a quorum is present. Chair recognizes Representative Galloway, Chair of the Committee on Commerce, who reports the following bills. House Bill 577, reported as amended. Will the House agree to the bill? Agreed to. House Bill 922, reported as amended. Will the House agree to the bill? Agreed to. Chair recognizes Representative Galloway, Chair of the Committee on Commerce, who reports the following bills with a request that they be re-referred. House Bill 116 to the Committee on House Consumer Protection, Technology, and Utilities. House Bill 126 to the Committee on House Consumer Protection, Technology, and Utilities. Will the House agree to the report? Agreed to.
We're just waiting to see whether they go through these bills today or whether they're going to freaking. This is on the General Assembly's calendar for today. They're talking about a whole lot of shit I ain't seeing on this calendar.
Chair recognizes the majority leader, who calls up House Bill 953, printers number 950
This is
on
okay, so
page
maybe they're
1
getting
of
rolling because
today's
this is
House calendar.
953. This
The
is the
clerk will
first thing
now
on the
read a
calendar.
summary of the bill.
This bill repeals the frozen dessert law.
Will the House agree to the bill? Agreed to. Chair recognizes Representative Briggs, who's the chair of the Committee on Judiciary, who reports the following bills. House Bill 689, reported as amended. Will the House agree to the bill? Agreed to. Chair recognizes Representative Briggs, the chair of the Committee on Judiciary, who reports the following bills with a request that they be re-referred. House Bill 88 to the Committee on Local Government. Will the House agree to the report? It's agreed to. In the gallery, we are so excited. Our next guest of students have arrived. Our colleague, Representative Monroe, has brought to us the Archbishop Wood girls basketball
I
team.
reckon we'll know when they
They
bring in
won the
Moms Demand
state
Action when they're going to hit on these
and
gun
of course,
bills.
Representative Monroe and all of us are very proud of your efforts. Congratulations and welcome to the floor of the House.
Yeah,
Chair
I don't,
recognizes Majority Caucus Chair for a caucus announcement. Representative Schlossberg.
like they're just running through everything and just, okay.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. House Democrats will caucus at 12 o'clock. We will be prepared to come to the floor at 1:15.
Chair thanks the gentleman. Chair recognizes the Minority Caucus Chair for a caucus announcement. Representative Dunbar.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Republicans will caucus at 11:45. It's 11:45. Republicans will caucus. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
They might not
Chair
get to
thanks
these
the
until
gentleman.
after
The
lunch.
House
Then
will
if they're
stand
gonna
in
hit
recess
caucus
until
and-
1:15. Excuse me. Chair recognizes the gentleman who's the Chair of Appropriations, Representative Harris.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The House Appropriations Committee will meet in the Majority Caucus Room immediately at the break. Appropriations Committee meeting, the Majority Caucus Room immediately at the break. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, so it looks like they're gonna
Chair
damn,
recognize the gentleman.
we're gonna switch over and watch some of this mental health hearing.
We have, as we've talked about, 2 decades of stagnant rates in traditional Medicare. We have Medicare Advantage plans in some markets that are so consolidated.
It looks
that
like these
they're
cats, they're gonna go into damn
So let me ask you this.
recess.
You know, my wife, who's a retired general surgeon, once
Go
said, "If they pay
caucus
you
for a
below
little
your cost,
while.
you can't make it up on volume."
That is true.
And so,
We just have to keep an eye on to make sure the speaker doesn't call them back sooner and then be
and
like,
knowing that there are
we're
people
voting on all these.
Yes, I am
and
on the
okay.
provider panel
Done.
because I still have some patients whom I see, and I will
And I don't put
occasionally
that
see a new
past them at
patient
all.
under certain circumstances. It almost seems though that we have to have some sort of threshold to analyze this. Does a patient, yes, they're open for new
Yeah,
patients.
some of these moms
but how many
demand
new
action
patients
need
will
to
they
meet some
receive a
dads
year from
demand
this particular payment plan?
love
Because I
it.
think we have to bring sophistication to
Maybe
this
they'll
analysis as opposed to
get
insurance
right.
plans are all bad, for example. Your thoughts on that?
Well, there are physicians on panels who have not seen any patients
I
for
get that.
years, and so that's fixable by the health plan. If it's a small number, then I think we need to turn to the physician. And there's a difference between being contracted. So, and we see this also with physicians at multiple locations, right, where they're contracted at 30 spots in case
Well, but
they
what
go
we're gonna
there,
do?
but they wouldn't want to be
We're gonna
listed
go
on
work
the
on
directory
guns in a
because they
minute.
literally go cover for a colleague
Listen to
every couple
this
of
and
years.
work
So
on guns.
I think this is where having a low burden
2 guns.
way for physicians
Yeah, I
to
think
have
we got
input and actually be able to tell the
we got some work
plans
to do on a couple.
when and if they want to appear on those directories based on whether they're accepting new patients in that plan.
Well, so with my last, I'm already over time, but in 5 more seconds, send me that low burden way. If AMA's got a way to do that, we could somehow.
I ran a couple rounds with that AR-10 yesterday. I just got to stake out all the screws and cast them up on that thing, and it'll be done.
I appreciate that. Now you, thank you.
Little AR-9s running like a scalded dog, so I should just have to stake the castle nut on that.
Had the opportunity to listen in my office to a lot of the discussion this morning, particularly.
Yeah, I'll go put an ambi safety on an AR.
Concept that we are talking about today, and I'm so appreciative of my colleague Senator Cornyn asking Dr. Trestman the question about why it's important, and that's where we need to start, obviously. But let me ask you this, Dr. Trestman:
What you think, Rose?
how would this integrated model help us alleviate the existing workforce shortage? Would it?
I think it'd go a long way to helping, Senator, and thank you for all of your work in this domain. The opportunity is this: if we partner psychiatrists with appropriate support staff, embedding into primary care, we can keep people in primary care without them having to physically be seen by psychiatry. One psychiatrist for 2 or 3 hours a week can review a panel of between 40 and 60 patients to provide adequate support to the primary care team so that we can give guidance and support them. Additionally, something that was already addressed was workforce burnout, keeping people in play, keeping them satisfied with their work. It's morally frustrating not to be able to refer someone to care. If you're the primary care doc, you see someone who needs care, it's beyond your scope and you can't do it. The collaborative care model and other potential models allow primary care to do what they want to do.
Thank you. And Dr. Resnick, I appreciate your comments regarding the burnout issue and the pre-authorization. I just had some doctors in my office talking about the concerns about this prior pre-authorization requirement and how frustrating it can be. So thank you. But can I jump to, I only have about 5 minutes. I want to jump to rural Nevada, which is similar to Northern California. And so let me, Dr. Rideout, let me ask you this, because as with the integrated primary care, telehealth has proven to be valuable tool for rural Nevada in my state, and essentially to also extend our mental health workforce. And while we're making steps in the right direction, I am concerned that the telehealth and expanded primary care alone will not meet our workforce needs, particularly in our rural communities when it comes to behavioral health professionals in the long term. So in your view, how are contracting issues driving the supply problem in rural areas? How do we address that?
Well, I would agree with you that despite the huge uptick in telehealth visits, it's not going to be enough to solve the supply problem. And as I think a number of panelists have mentioned, primary care physicians, I'm one of them, do provide a certain level of mental health care, but they too are burning out. They too are aging out. So you've got essentially stopgap measures. And I think in terms of contracting, in my experience across plans, purchasers, and providers, it's the conditions of participation, including rates, but not limited to rates, that really drives whether people want to participate or not. We've heard that psychiatrists, which are actually a relatively small percentage of the total mental health providers, it just costs too much to do it. I would bring back a thought of integrated care. We've talked a lot about integrated care in terms of medical and behavioral integration. There's also an integrated care model where physicians of multiple specialties practice under one organizational structure in an organization that's large enough to provide telehealth, large enough to provide data analytics, and large enough to essentially cover some of the shortages through better contracting or better load management within the group. So I think that's hard in a rural area. People don't concentrate that way.
Kind of keeping an eye on some of these appeals courts
Thank you. Dr. Resnick, did you have a comment?
today. I don't see much going on with
I'm
them.
glad you brought up contracting, because when we look at the data, and AMA produces these data every year,
Really anything to
most areas around this country have highly concentrated insurance
spend a
markets
whole
where
lot of time
one or
looking
two
at.
plans cover the vast majority of patients in that area. So they're really, in rural Nevada or in big urban centers, there's not meaningful contracting. And we have physicians who have a big panel of patients, and the insurer just sends them a letter at the end of the year that says, thanks very much, we're done with you. Or it's really take it or leave it contracts that they present that increasingly are lower and lower percents of Medicare. So it is not a level playing field between the physicians who actually want to be contracted to be able to take care of their patients and the health plans.
Well, and it sounds like we need another panel of health plan providers to be able to talk to, and I look forward to that opportunity. Thank you, Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman.
we need another panel. We need more panels.
Next, and I understand one of our colleagues on the Republican side is coming back as well. But with that, unless there are people we don't know about, we will wrap up and there's a vote on. Senator Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm glad I got here in time. Welcome all of you. Thanks for joining us and for the
Might hear from
service
him.
you
I might back
provide
this
to so
up
many
to the damn
people. And
start just to see.
it's more important than ever. I mean, we all living through the pandemic. We're all saw different parts of the healthcare system, perhaps, and it's more important than ever that people in my state and Nevada and Oregon and Idaho get the mental health care when they need it. We know that we didn't pay enough attention to mental health during the pandemic, and mental health.
Let's go ahead and back this shit up. I really want to see whether they get started on some gun control stuff in this hearing. It's a freaking hearing.
Ohio's already gotten the world's attention for our cardiac
Sure
and
enough,
oncology
could.
innovations. Now we're on a mission to treat hundreds of diseases through gene and cell therapies.
Loved ones. Unfortunately, too often after
Back up a little bit. Ron Wyden. So freaking. Dude sounds like he's giving it permanent one job.
Finance Committee will come to order. Today, across America, insurance companies are selling mental health coverage to our people worried about their mental health or that of their loved ones. Unfortunately, too often after these insurers take big premiums from our people, they let them down. The providers they advertise aren't available. They can't get appointments. The firm basically says we aren't taking new patients, which of course was not represented to them initially in that way.
Health
The
professions,
fact is,
regulations must be
these
flexible enough
Americans
to
are being
support
ripped off
effective use of
by
healthcare
what the
workforce,
government
meet the needs of the
Health
community.
Office
Enacting
describes
regulations to
as a
support their
ghost
relaxing
network. Not my language, language of the Government Accountability Office. Now, to me, what a ghost network is all about is essentially selling health coverage under false pretenses, because the providers who advertise aren't picking up the phone, they aren't taking patients. And in any other business, if a product or service doesn't meet expectations, consumers get a refund. In my view, it's a breach of contract for insurance companies to sell their plan for thousands of dollars each month while their product is unusable due to a ghost network. And so I'm going to work with all of my colleagues here.
It's called Obamacare.
Democratic and Republican, to get some real accountability for these patients who paid good money for mental health coverage, and they find that there is very little there. And in a moment of national crisis about mental health, with the problem growing at such a rapid rate, the widespread existence of ghost networks is unacceptable. And somebody is worried about their mental health. The mental health
Show enough, G23.
hard to work up the courage.
Most any gun bill that comes through has his fingerprints with it, or he signs on to it.
And if they can't get help, the last thing they need from a big insurance company is a symphony of please hold music when they call, and non-working numbers and rejection. I think we can all imagine, because we're all hearing from our constituents. I'm looking at my Republican colleagues. I've talked to almost all of them personally about this mental health challenge, and we've been working on it together. But what I've described
when
is
we're
not
gonna
a
move this show down to the
hypothetical.
shop
Last
and
month,
start
my staff
working.
conducted a secret shopper study. They made over 100 calls to make an appointment with a mental health provider for a family member with depression. And they looked at 12 Medicare Advantage insurance plans in 6 states. The results were clear. Our secret shoppers could get an appointment. Now, this is after people had paid vast sums. They could get an appointment only 18% of the time. That means more than 8 in 10 mental health providers listed in these insurance company materials were inaccurate or weren't taking appointments. A third of the time, the phone number they called was a dead end completely. In one instance, staff trying to reach a mental health provider was connected to a high school student health center. And Senator Cassidy is real pro at all this health issue, and I think both of us would probably say we laugh, but we really feel like crying for the patients. I think it's kind of representative, of it. By the way, in my home state, I'm not very proud of what our investigators found there too. My staff didn't find that we could make one successful appointment. Other secret shopper studies looked at commercial health insurance, found the same thing. In 2017, researchers posing as parents seeking care for a child with depression got an appointment 17% of the time. 2015, pretty much the same results. Ghost networks are an ongoing, persistent problem. The Finance Committee has been looking closely at this issue.
Ghost networks, ghost
Put
guns.
a lot of sweat equity into developing
Them ghosts are everywhere. Call Ghostbusters.
health care for all Americans, from telehealth to youth mental health to workforce to care integration and parity. And I can look down the row, starting with Senator Crapo, to my Republican colleagues, because we have been working on this in a bipartisan basis. And we've got plenty more to do, as Senator Crapo and I talk about in our weekly conversations. Finally, just looking at the ghost network issue to wrap up, it's a three-legged approach. We've got to have more oversight, greater transparency, and serious consequences for insurance companies that are fleecing American consumers. And I believe certainly greater transparency, for example, ought to be an easy one for members of this committee to get around. I don't know anything about the accountability you get with transparency being a partisan issue. So I want to work with my colleagues on that issue, on the accountability questions. And I want to look at this across the board, not just with respect to Medicare and Medicaid. And many of my colleagues have expressed interest in applying policies to commercial insurance like employer-sponsored plans. We've got a lot of work to do. There isn't going to be anything partisan about it. And let me yield to my friend, Senator Crapo.
Thank you, Senator Wyden. And, you know, it's no secret to anybody that you and I have prioritized mental health delivery in America. In the last Congress, we got a number of major initiatives through.
I keep looking, trying to find any kind of oral arguments I can find out of Illinois.
That we still
can't find anything up there right now.
I appreciate the opportunity to work with you on it. Last Congress, as I said, we came together to enact dozens of bipartisan policies to expand access to mental health care services. These reforms will increase the number of providers participating in Medicare and allow patients to receive care in more convenient locations, including through telehealth. However, in order for these improvements to achieve their potential, patients need accurate and up-to-date information on their health care options. I've long championed Medicare Advantage for its ability to offer patients choice and control over their health care. Through robust competition and innovative benefit offerings, Medicare Advantage provides consumer-focused health coverage to millions of Americans. As enrollment continues to grow, improving the accuracy of provider directories could further strengthen Medicare Advantage. The patient-provider relationship is the foundation of the healthcare system. Whether a patient is suffering a mental health crisis or just received a troubling diagnosis, directories should serve as crucial tools to help seniors across the country. While we work to better align incentives to improve provider directory accuracy, we must also do so without increasing burdensome requirements that will only weaken our mental health workforce. Regulatory red tape and reimbursement strain, among others, can also increase patient access, exacerbating physician shortages, compounding burnout, and eroding healthcare access and quality. Congress should build on their targeted relief measures, like the ones we advanced last year, including temporary physician fee schedule support and Medicare telehealth expansion to address these issues on a bipartisan and sustainable basis. Physician payment stabilization and telehealth coverage for seniors have received strong support from members of both parties in both chambers. As we look to enhance Medicare, we should prioritize these and other bipartisan goals.
Doesn't look like North Carolina's Judiciary Committee is having anything on good today.
I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today about the opportunities to streamline and improve provider reporting requirements, empower patients, and give them accurate information and advance more transparent health
Wonder.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Crapo. You have certainly laid out a number of areas where we can continue our bipartisan cooperation.
What are you doing, Will?
Let me introduce our witnesses
You
briefly.
plug it in?
Harris, Myrick is Vice President of Partnerships at
You can plug it in.
Inseparable, a nonprofit organization working to improve mental health care. We welcome you, ma'am, and I know you're a leading mental health advocate and executive. Dr. Jack Resnick is here as President of the American Medical Association. Good to see you again, Dr. Resnick. I know you're a professor and chair of the Department of Dermatology at the University of California at San Francisco. And you and I have been in discussions a number of times over the years, and we're glad you could be here. Robert Tressman, PhD, MD, comes to us at the recommendation of the American Psychiatric Association, organization that's been at the forefront of mental health parity and provider health accuracy. We welcome you, Dr. Tressman, a long relationship with the American Psychiatric Association. Mary Giliberti, JD, serves as Chief Public Policy Officer for Mental Health America. She's also author of an important blog series called Designed to Fail, looking at how these powerful special interests determine the quality and accessibility of so much of mental health care in America. And then we're glad to have Dr. Jeff Rideout, the President and CEO of the Integrated Healthcare Association. He's recognized for his work in provider data management. And that's a mouthful, but in plain old English, it makes sure that there's a focus on, particularly now where there's so much content out, making sure it's presented in an intelligible way. And we appreciate it. Glad you're here. Let's begin with you, Ms. Myrick.
Thank you. Chair Wyden, Ranking Member Crapo, and members of the Senate Finance Committee. Thank you for conducting this hearing today and providing me the honor of testifying regarding ghost networks and provider directories. My name is Karis Myrick, and I'm Vice President of Partnerships for Inseparable, a nonprofit working to advance policy that reflects the belief that the health of our minds and our bodies is inseparable. I'm also a mental health advocate and survivor with lived experience of ghost networks and health plans. I'm here today to share my story and bring attention to this very critical issue. Ghost networks erect invisible, unexpected barriers within our health systems, preventing people from accessing the care and support that they need. They are particularly damaging for those of us living with serious mental health conditions like me, as they can result in delayed or inadequate treatment or even going without, any of which can be devastating and have devastating consequences. My first experience with ghost networks occurred when I had to change my health insurance due to a new position with the federal government in 2014. Navigating the Blue Cross Blue Shield for federal employees provider directory to find a psychiatrist in the DC or Maryland.
Oregon's lost their mind.
Turned into one rejection after another.
And they know what they're doing.
Call after call resulted in the following types of responses.
They know these gun companies aren't going to sit there and serialize uppers.
She doesn't work here.
And then how many serial numbers do you need? If you mismatch an upper, or do your uppers have to stay with your lowers so all the serial numbers match? You can't swap anything.
Or a recorded message. Dr. Fill in the blank is no longer accepting new patients. If this is an emergency, hang up and dial 911. I spent countless days and hours scouring the networks and finally found a psychiatrist who was taking new patients. Success, though, was short-lived. In a call to set up an appointment, I was asked about my diagnosis, and I responded without any hesitation, schizophrenia. A pause, a long silence, and then the response, oh, I don't
Are
take
all
patients
women?
with schizophrenia. I asked if they have any suggestions or referrals to help me find a doctor who does. And the answer is, check the provider directory. Going back to the directory was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Lots of hay, very few needles, and none that can stitch together the needs of my schizophrenia garment. Finally, I contacted my psychiatrist back in California and asked if and how he could remain my doctor. I ended up flying regularly to Los Angeles at my own expense for over a 4-year period to ensure that I could be and stay well. I also paid high out-of-network copays, but at least I had a provider. On the same plan, when I needed a doctor for what turned out to be thyroid cancer, I was able to find an endocrinologist the very same day. But for mental health, it was a very different story, a story that continued throughout my career. In 2018, I began working for the Los Angeles County Department of Mental Health. My LA-based psychiatrist now was my colleague, so I had to find another psychiatrist. I searched the provider directory with trepidation and received dead-end responses. In 2020 and 2022, I dealt with new insurance plans and new provider directories. Each time, it felt like the movie Groundhog Day, with the all too familiar responses. There's no provider here, no one by that name, oh, they're retired, or they aren't taking new patients. There's literally no there there. Unfortunately, my story is not unique. Many of my peers with mental health diagnoses face similar challenges, regardless of whether they are covered by Medicare, Medicaid, or private insurance. Even today, despite having health insurance that is otherwise considered excellent, I have no regular psychiatrist. This leaves me with ongoing anxiety about what will happen if I should need more intensive or ongoing care. I have experienced being unhoused, unemployed, having interactions with the criminal justice system, and involuntary hospitalizations. I don't ever want to go through those traumatizing experiences again because I wasn't able to find a provider through my health plan's directory and get the help I need to stay well. I don't have to worry about this for my thyroid condition. I have a specialist, an endocrinologist, readily available under every insurance plan. Why then do I not have the same for my mental health? Senator Wyden, you had said, too often Americans who need affordable mental health care hit a dead end when they try to find a provider that's covered by their insurance. Ghost networks means that the list of mental health providers and insurance company directories is almost useless. Never a truer word. As a survivor with lived experience of ghost networks and health plans, I urge the committee to act on this critical issue through policies, and I have 3 recommendations. 1, provide the oversight, enforcement, and incentives necessary to result in highly accurate provider directories. 2, require the inclusion of psychiatric subspecialties in directories. And 3, implement a federally operated mechanism like online reporting system or dedicated 1-800 number for consumers and plan members to report their experiences of ghost networks and to use that information to enforce policy and inform policy and enforcement actions. So thank you again for the opportunity to share my story today. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have for me at this time.
I think it is very clear you're going to get plenty of questions, Ms. Myrick, and we thank you very much for being here. Let's go to Dr. Resnick.
Chairman Wyden, Ranking Member Crapo, thank you for the invitation to participate in this hearing. I'm Jack Resnick, President of the American Medical Association. I'm a practicing physician and chair of the Department of Dermatology at the University of California, San Francisco. You know, as you said, physician and provider directories are critically important tools. They help patients shop for and select insurance products that cover physicians who are already part of their healthcare team and find in-network care that they need once they're covered. They help physicians make referrals for our patients, and they serve as a representation of a plan's network adequacy for regulators. So when directory information is incorrect, the results are costly and devastating for patients, as you heard from Ms. Myrick and her lived experience. You know, at a time when our nation is fighting a mental and behavioral health crisis, inaccurate directories are not only an absolutely infuriating barrier for patients and families already in great periods of stress, who must waste time calling practice after practice to find one that is actually in network and accepting new patients, but they help mask the fact that insurers consistently and frankly egregiously fail to provide adequate networks and comply with parity laws, causing harm to millions of Americans. And the problem is not limited to mental health. You know, not only have I read the many studies showing the scope of problems with provider directories, but I in 154 listings, almost half represented duplicates. Among the remaining listings, many of those practices didn't exist, had never heard of the listed physician, or reported that they had died, retired, or moved away. Others were not accepting new patients or were the wrong subspecialty altogether. So in the end, just 27% of listings were unique, accepted the listed plan, and offered an appointment. And sadly, more recent studies, including your own, Mr. Chairman, demonstrate that these problems persist and maybe even are worsening. Achieving directory accuracy, it's not simple, and I acknowledge that physician practices do have a role to play, but the responsibility of directory accuracy ultimately lies with the plans. Being listed correctly in a directory is a fundamental component of a physician health plan contract, and health plans are not making it easy for physicians to help. I work at a pretty big academic medical center. You'd think our big staff devoted to this work would equate to more accurate listings. But health plans are typically taking 6 to 8 months to add or delete physicians after we notify them of changes. They don't use standardized formats, so we have to send different rosters with different formatting to each and every one. For big and small practices, typically contracting with 20 or more plans, this amounts to a costly and just demoralizing administrative burden. And it's happening at a time when the physician workforce, emerging from the pandemic with skyrocketing levels of burnout, is facing a web of growing and wasteful obstacles from these same health plans, obstacles like prior authorization. My physician colleagues, they need to be freed up to spend time doing what drew us all to medicine in the first place, taking great care of our patients. So what are some solutions? Well, first, in 2021, the AMA collaborated with CAQH to examine the pain points for both physicians and health plans in achieving directory accuracy. And I'm here to urge all organizations charged with regulating health plans to take a more active role in regularly reviewing and assessing the accuracy of directories. For example, regulators should require health plans to submit accurate directories every year. That's what patients deserve. Audit directory accuracy more frequently. Take enforcement action against plans that fail to maintain complete and accurate directories with monetary penalties. Encourage stakeholders to develop common standards for updating physician information in their directories so practices like mine don't have 20 different methods, and require plans to immediately remove physicians who no longer participate in their network. My study was in 2014, and here we are today. Enough is enough. We can fix this. Moreover, I urge policymakers to continue to examine the issues that phantom networks and inaccurate directories may be masking. Problems like overall workforce shortages, a lack of network adequacy, and plans' rampant failures to adhere to mental health parity laws. Thank you so much for considering my comments. Happy to take questions, and I'm looking forward to the discussion later.
Great.
Thank you.
Dr. Trustman. Chairman Wyden, Ranking Member Crapo, and members of the Senate Finance Committee. On behalf of the American Psychiatric Association, I really want to thank you for conducting this hearing and for all of the work you've been doing in this domain. We greatly appreciate your continuing bipartisan efforts to confront the mental health and substance use crises in our country. And we're grateful for the opportunity to give testimony today. Ghost networks affect private sector health plans purchased by individuals and employers, and public plans like Medicaid and Medicare Advantage. My written testimony references data from several studies about the ubiquitous nature of directory inaccuracies. These include, as we've already heard, misrepresentations that clinicians are accepting new patients, wrong phone numbers, and even listings for clinicians who are no longer in the state. But I'd like to speak to you about my personal experience with how phantom networks affect our patients, burden physicians and other providers, and increase costs. My department at
A little bit of location change.
is in rural Virginia. We deliver over
What's up, Sister
90,000
Vanessa?
care visits per year to individuals living with a broad range of complex mental illnesses and substance use disorders. Access to care in rural
Man, it's
settings
pretty
like
here.
mine is
Last couple days, it's
particularly
just
challenging.
been windy, but man, the
These
sun's been
areas
out.
are generally physician shortage areas. To
Damn, you
begin
can still get away with wearing a little
and
bit of a
patients
light
can be
jacket.
required
You're
to
not
travel
fucking
for
sweating to
hours
death.
to find psychiatric care. Finding anyone who is accepting new patients can be nearly impossible.
Oh, I'm gonna move down to the shop. I
Carilion
gotta get
Clinic
my ass in
is the
gear. I got a
region's
couple things I gotta
only
do to some
tertiary
guns.
center. And we function as the public health point of access for so
And
many.
I'm dragging ass.
My clinic is in almost all networks, and our waiting list for patients currently numbers over 800 people.
It's not
Those who are
serious.
healthy and well-educated,
I just gotta
going through an
stake
inaccurate
some
provider
screws, stake
list
some
and being
castle
told
nuts, swap
repeatedly that
over safety,
we're not taking new patients.
general stupid
This
shit.
provider is retired. We no longer accept your insurance.
Ah.
Or leaving a message that no one
I just gotta get damn
returns
motivated.
is frustrating. But for people experiencing significant mental illness or substance use disorders, the process at best is demoralizing. And at worst is a setup for clinical deterioration and a preventable crisis.
Bearing Arms Camping
Many
Company.
are already experiencing
Annie 2A
profound
acted
feelings
to
of
see
worthlessness,
sex in a gun shirt.
grief from loss and trauma, and or the
These
impact
motherfuckers
of
are trying too
substance
damn
use.
hard these days, guys.
Patients have shared
These
with
anti-gun
me that
motherfuckers
they
are killing
felt
me.
themselves repeatedly
I see
rejected,
sex
and that
in a
somehow
gun shirt.
the fact that they couldn't
All right,
find a
lady, wear the
provider
gun
was
shirt,
their
touch it.
fault. Some give up looking for care. At Carillion, keeping our credentialing updated with insurance plans is time-consuming and expensive. We have multiple full-time employees doing nothing but maintaining our credentialing with insurance companies and public payers, including Medicaid and Medicare Advantage. This is an a burden insurance companies, I believe, should bear, not those of us trying to provide desperately needed care. The national administrative burden of physician practices to send directory updates to insurers through disparate technologies, schedules, and formats is $8.76 billion annually. Not all mental health clinicians practice in settings like mine that are willing and able to invest the resources needed to participate in the networks. Private practitioners make up a significant portion of the psychiatric workforce, and many do not participate in the networks because of the administrative burden. Ghost networks are both a cause and a symptom of a system that has shortchanged mental health care for decades. We need the help of Congress to change. My written testimony includes recommendations that we asked the committee to consider, many of which you're already pursuing. It's time to
Dude,
hold
is that the
funds
one where that
accountable for
cop ended up
maintaining accurate directories
handing another
and
cop
making
his damn
accurate
backup gun?
representations to patients, to clinicians.
The one
and to
donut
providers.
operator did?
Our patients also need public and private sector plans to be held accountable to the mental health parity law. Further investment in expanding the mental health workforce,
MC, what's up, my
particularly in
brother?
underserved areas, is vital. Our Congress might further incentivize the adoption of models of integrated care, like the collaborative care model, that improves outcomes and expands access while furthering the support of our primary care physicians in their ability to deliver a lot of the care. Thank you
There's
for the
supposed to be
opportunity
a damn
testify.
hearing in
I
the
look forward to your questions. Thank
Great. Thank you, Doctor.
Senate
Gilbert.
Chair
Judiciary
Wyden,
this
Ranking Member
afternoon.
Crapo, and members of the Senate Finance
Starts at
Committee.
like
Thank
2:30.
you
I
for
don't
the
know whether I'll be
opportunity
able
to
to cover
testify
much,
today regarding
but
provider
it's about
directory and
advertising in a
and ghost
digital
networks,
world. So I'm
issues that
wondering
my
if they're going to try
organization
to
has
push
been
all
working
this
on
shit
for
about
over a
gun
decade
advertising.
and that cause great harm. My name is Mary Giliberti, and I lead the public policy efforts for Mental Health America. My written testimony details my experiences helping friends,
Yeah,
families,
you're right
and
about that,
community
Sam.
members access mental health providers. The very first question I ask them is, do you need these services covered by insurance? I ask that question because I know it's going to be quicker and less effort if they can pay out of pocket, but so much more expensive. For example, I was helping one young woman who, like many others, found that her mental health condition was deteriorating during COVID, and her therapist recommended that she seek medication. Not surprisingly, she wanted to pay a minimal copay and not hundreds of dollars each visit. So I helped her make a list of recommended psychiatrists that were on her directory. And by now, you've heard the story many times. She started making calls. Some didn't call her back. Others told her they were not on her network, even though they were in her directory. Weeks went by, and her condition only worsened. Fortunately, somebody at work knew of a telehealth option in her plan, and she was able to get
That's what
in-network
I
care,
had to
but
remember
only
right
after
there.
a very painful delay. Some people, as was noted, give up entirely after making these unsuccessful calls. When you're experiencing symptoms like lack of motivation, anxiety, and psychosis, and you're getting worse, you are least able to navigate these inaccurate directories. And these are not just anecdotes. They're supported by many studies. And unfortunately, Chair Wyden, your state didn't do very well in this study either of Medicaid managed care programs. Using claims data, researchers found that 2/3 of the mental health prescribers listed in the plan directories were phantoms who were not billing the plan. 2/3. Reviews of Medicare Advantage plans also show high levels of inaccuracies. So what can be done? We know from studies of state statutes, it is not enough to just require accurate directories. That's been done and over this past decades has not worked. We have 3 recommendations for policy change. First, the data must be verified by a reliable method, such as an independent audit and claims data. At nonprofit organizations like mine, we can't just submit our financial data. We have to have it audited by somebody. Last week, CMS issued a proposed Medicaid managed care access rule requiring states to use secret shopper surveys by an independent entity. The surveys would determine the accuracy of directories and wait times for mental health and substance use services, among others. This policy is an important step forward, should be finalized, but CMS also needs to require audits of Medicare Advantage plans through its own review and those of independent entities. Plans also should be required to use their claims data to periodically reconcile these directories. The workforce shortages we have, if they're not seeing somebody, we know that if they're not filing claims, they're not seeing people, they're not in the directory. Second, the information should be transparent. In other areas of healthcare, CMS requires transparency. This area needs more sunlight. The proposed Medicaid rule requires secret shopper information to be posted on a state website. That should be very easily understood by consumers and regulators, and we should have that kind of transparency across all plans regulated by CMS so we can see what's going on by plan, not in the aggregate, but by plan. Third, and most importantly, plans have to be fiscally incentivized to provide accurate directories. This requires carrots and sticks. On the carrot side, we can incorporate accuracy rates into overall quality ratings that affect which plans consumers choose and bonus payments like the star rating system. It's important that the plans that are doing well are rewarded for doing well. Then we should have penalties for those that are not doing so well, similar to HIPAA's enforcement provisions with compliance reviews, clear benchmarks, and civil monetary penalties that are enough to change behavior. An individual should always have financial protection if they rely on an inaccurate directory. In my written testimony, I reference related areas that would also affect directories, including reimbursement rates, integrated care, telehealth flexibilities, and expanding parity coverage to Medicare Advantage and Medicaid and Medicare fee-for-service. In conclusion, there will always be some provider directory inaccuracies, but the high rates consistently revealed in recent studies are not minimal errors. They are consumer and government deception, misrepresenting the value of the plan, undermining consumer choice, and causing great suffering. With the right verification of data, transparency requirements, and fiscal incentives, we can do so much better. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Giliberti. You will have questions for sure. Dr. Rideout.
Good morning, Chairman Wyden, Ranking Member Grego, and members of the committee. Thank you for having me here today. Dr. Jeff Rideout, President and CEO of the Integrated Healthcare Association, a California leadership group whose members include physician groups, health plans, hospital systems, regulatory agencies, and other healthcare stakeholders. Programs, IHA manages a California-wide provider data management program called Symphony, which is the focus of my remarks today. The issue of provider information accuracy is of great professional concern to me. Prior to joining IHA, I was the first senior medical advisor at Covered California, our state's insurance exchange, overseeing the launch and shortly following the wind down of its first online provider directory. So I'm very familiar with the challenges in creating accurate provider information. The problem is real and pervasive. The key question is how to solve for it.
Damn YouTube.
The accuracy challenges that were exposed in that early Covered California effort led to new regulatory requirements in California through Senate Bill 137. It also led to a comprehensive industry effort to address the longstanding challenges in provider data accuracy, which became the Symphony program. Symphony's goal is to simplify and unify how providers and health plans share, reconcile, and validate provider directory information. With our technology partner Availity, we are creating a single utility designed to be the primary source of information, which will replace existing and non-aligned processes between health plans and providers. As an output of the process, Symphony creates a golden record by applying a strict set of agreed upon rules that determine what the best information is when the information from multiple organizations is conflicting. It is a form of machine learning. The more organizations, the greater the likelihood of finding errors before this information goes back to the plans and providers for inclusion in their directories. Symphony now has 17 contracted health plans, more than 100 contracted provider organizations, and is also engaged with Covered California. In fact, participation in Symphony is a Covered California contractual requirement for all participating plans. Symphony currently maintains over 170,000 unique provider records and supports more than 300 data elements, such as license verification and accepting new patients. Ultimately, sustainable provider data improvement requires a collaborative solution. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services said it best in a 2018 report, quote, "It has become clear that a centralized repository for provider data is a key component missing from the accurate provider directory information," end quote. Symphony is exactly that type of centralized repository. What have we learned so far? Provider data encompasses literally hundreds of specific data elements, and most need to be verified on a very frequent basis. We need more. We need more data elements related to LGBT support. We need more data elements related to race and ethnicity. So the problem of the data elements can just grow, not in addition to the data itself, providers need to attest to the accuracy of the information every 90 days or so. Under these conditions, providers are much more willing to do so if they can attest once for multiple plans. To understand it is the provider data that is ultimately populating a provider directory, and it's the ultimate source of accuracy. Based on the number of different data elements, all Symphony stakeholders now have agreed to prioritize. Before Symphony could even get started processing data, we had to first create standards that conform with regulatory requirements. These include standards for timeliness, data quality and completeness, and data accuracy. Critically, these are the same across multiple plans and provider organizations. This allows Symphony to apply a mastering process. Identifying inaccuracies and correcting them is necessary and is feasible. In the last 30-day period for Symphony, provider data, unique providers identified over 138,000 inconsistent data elements, which we call updates or corrections, that require health plan and provider changes. Of these, 5,000 were errors in physical office address, which is an access issue, while nearly 2,200 were related to license issues. And we do this every 90 days. Improving provider data accuracy is a complex undertaking. For independent providers, which mental health providers are more likely to be, this can be impossible to avoid. Without a centralized data repository that supports a multi-plan provider directory, health plans and providers will be unable to maintain accurate provider data and directories individually, even with the best of intentions. This is critical for mental and behavioral health providers who are increasingly less likely to be in health plan networks, making it even more critical for them to be able to update their data in a convenient, single centralized repository. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Ms. Myrick, I was listening to your eloquent statement, and I was saying to myself, what is it like in America when someone like you, who is in the Obama administration, who specializes in healthcare, gets bounced around the mental health system the way you described? I just kept thinking to myself, what's it like for the typical person, the typical family, if they go through what you described? And I think the question I have for you, because I think you're exhibit A for why we so desperately need reform, what's going to be the consequence of doing nothing? What if the insurance companies just keep doing business as usual? What are going to be the consequences? Because it seems to me the problem you described intersecting with the tremendous increase in demand is a big problem for the country. So just if you would paint the picture of what happens if we don't do the kinds of reforms that you and your colleagues are talking about.
Thank you for the question. I don't know that I'm a soothsayer, but I think, I think about the consequences. It's much of what I talked about in my testimony, that, if you're going without health care or you're going without mental health care, the consequences are dire. And we see them in our statistics related to people with mental health
All these
conditions
people are
who
fucking nuts.
become unhoused.
Mike McClune, brother, what's going on?
criminalized, who end their own lives.
Hey,
And
we're trying to keep an eye on the
really,
PA
I
House
think
today
the
to see about
consequences
catching
at the
those
end of the day
assholes.
are about the difference
They went
between
on
life
break. They're
and
coming
death.
back at 1:30.
And
They've got
that's pretty
bills on to
dire.
vote on
We may have to
today
put
in the
you
House.
charge of the federal government. By the way,
I
when
think
you
it's
were
Faith
making
George
those
bill, a
comments-
couple others.
Yes,
Yeah, the information you sent me was
in
dead on.
California. When you were making those comments, your colleagues, particularly the physicians on the panel, everybody's nodding. So
Nah, dude, I don't really mess around with blade
let me
work
go
too much.
to you, Ms. Giliberti, with respect to the financial burden of these ghost networks. As I mentioned, the Finance Committee felt like a gazillion calls, but 120 looked for an appointment for a senior with depression. The vast
Dude, I've seen the
majority of
AMP and Mini
cases,
Mart
the
back in the
vast
day
majority,
somewhere. Might have been
and
Washington
one thing
State,
that's incidental, resulted in a dead-end phone call.
Virginia, somewhere like that.
We're able to make an appointment 18% of the time after
Somewhere
hours
like
and
that.
hours on the phone. And the reason I wanted to talk to you, because it reminded me a little bit of my Gray Panther experiences, what you were talking about, and kind of crunching some of the numbers. For some patients who were able to make an appointment, they found out that the provider they saw, who was listed in their plan's directory, was actually out of network. So the patient gets stuck with the bill. Now, why should the patient be on the hook here? The insurance company is not doing what they purported to do when they were taking the consumer's money. And yet the patient, in what you've been describing and others who are advocating for consumers, seems to me actually backwards. Is the insurance company hasn't done what they indicated that they would do, but it's the patient who's on the hook when they desperately need coverage and they have to reach out of network. What should the committee do in a situation like this? My friend Senator Crapo has always been so constructive on this. We work in a bipartisan way. So when we see a problem, we say, hey, where's the common ground? We can get Democrats and Republicans before it. What is that kind of common ground here so that we can actually help that patient who, in my view, is just being fleeced? That's what we used to say it back when I was co-director of the Gray Panthers. We didn't talk health lingo. We said this person is just being fleeced. But now we got to figure out how to navigate reforms. What kind of reforms should Senator Crapo and I pursue here?
Well, first of all,
with our colleagues?
It should not be the responsibility of the individual, right? In my view, they should be compensated for the stress that comes when you get a bill like that. You open the paper and it's like, hundreds of dollars. You expect a $25 copay and you're looking at hundreds of dollars. They should compensate you for that stress. And instead, you're expected to pay that. So if the directory is inaccurate, the consumer should pay in-network prices. So their regular old copay. And the plan should have to cover the rest of that cost because their directory was inaccurate. So it should not fall on the person who's least able to bear the cost, right? I mean, if you think about these companies, who's in the best position to bear the cost? The individual or the company that for the mistake that was made? They shouldn't have to.
I'm over my time. Thank you all. The panel's been excellent. Senator.
Thank you, Senator Wyden. And Dr. Rouse, I'd like to start with you, and I'm going to ask a question similar to the one that Senator Wyden just asked Ms. Giliberti. And that is, well, first of all, thank you for the work that you've done on the ground. in terms of helping to improve the accuracy of provider directives.
Yeah, blade work's something, man,
You talked
I
about a
haven't
lot
got
of
into.
important things in your testimony.
I know some cats who are. They're into it
If you could
solid.
just summarize for us, what are some of the key practices that we need to be focusing on here as the solution? Bring it down to some of the best.
Well, I think you
Guns is my
highlighted several
domain,
of
let's
them.
put it that way.
Transparency being one, better auditing being another,
I need
potential
blade work
penalties
done. I
would be
get with
another.
them. They need gun
My
work done.
concern would be if this is done without sort of an on-the-ground operational solution, you will double down on bad practices. We will get more intensity from health plans to avoid penalties. We'll get more suppression of networks potentially. We will get more urgency and challenges for the physicians and other providers who can't afford and are really being distracted from what they're doing. So I think ultimately having a single source of truth, however that's organized, whether by state or nationally, gives everybody a fighting chance to say this problem is about intentions, or it is about accuracy, or it's a combination of both. So I would say it's hard work, but you've got to kind of get that part fixed as well, or else we'll just double down on what's happening now.
Well, thank you. And Dr. Resnick, again, following up on the same thing, you mentioned in your testimony that the physicians are facing a crisis here themselves trying to deal with this solution. And we're seeing a lot of unprecedented stress and burnout exacerbated by administrative burdens. We don't want another government program or another government mandate that just puts burdens on everybody and doesn't get to the solution. What could you do if you could just concisely bring it down to what's the best, what are some of the best things we should consider here to achieve this objective without causing the damage that could be caused?
We appreciate your leadership on this and the bipartisan engagement. There are some things we think you can do. And while there are some excess regulations we'd love to talk about in another hearing to reduce, this is one area where we actually need congressional help. And I think there are some straightforward things. We hear from HHS that they don't think they have the tools to audit and enforce and impose monetary penalties on the MA plans and the exchange plans that they have oversight of. I know it may not be in this committee's jurisdiction, but the Department of Labor needs additional authority around ERISA plans. And then we at the American Medical Association are putting in a lot of work with our colleagues in state medical associations and specialty societies, going to states to make sure that insurance commissioners also at the state level have increased authority. If we don't have monetary penalties on these plans for continuing to put out these fake networks to make these fake directories to make their networks look bigger than they are, we're not going to make progress.
Well, thank you. And Dr. Trestman, according to the National Institutes of Health, Americans in rural communities, as you indicated in your testimony, experience a significant disparity in mental health outcomes, even though the rates of mental illness are consistent in rural and metropolitan areas. Over the course of the past two Congresses, we've explored how different problems within our mental health care system disproportionately impact rural communities. Could you just tell us from your experience in practicing psychiatry in a rural community, how do inaccurate provider directories and other access issues impact these areas differently than metropolitan areas?
Thank you, Senator. I think many of the issues are identical. The challenge is the provider directories are even more sparse for us, and the geography is really challenging. The challenges that our patients have faced have driven us to many limited resolutions. Oftentimes, their primary care physicians have been tasked to take care of the psychiatric issues because there's no one else available. Helping us to empower them is really critical as well. So I think that telehealth has been another extraordinary advantage for people with broadband access and the ability to afford data plans. They have telehealth with video, which is wonderful. But in many rural areas, including mine, I do. This last week, I did some of my visits by audio only because that's all that was available. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Very important point. Senator Crapo and I, during our telehealth discussion, we heard consistently from rural communities that they support broadband, but if they don't have it, they want audio only. Senator Cornyn's next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for for this hearing today. Thanks to all the witnesses. This is a disturbing issue of ghost networks. I want to ask, though, that there's a bill that Senator Cortez Masto and I have introduced, and Dr. Trustman, you happened to mention this in your written testimony, the Complete Care Act. I know the nature of practicing medicine is evolved a lot, probably during your professional career, both yours and Dr. Resnick's. But one of the things that seems to make a lot of sense to me is we now are embracing the whole person and not just dealing with physical health, but mental health too, to find ways to integrate mental health into physician practices. Could you share more about how you think the bill might be able to help, Dr. Trustman?
Absolutely, and thank you so much for your work on this. You know, as I understand the bill, the opportunity is with the partnership between primary care and psychiatry. The challenge that we've seen over the years, and I work closely with our colleagues who developed the collaborative care model at the University of Washington. I've worked with people around the country, and I've tried to implement the collaborative care model in my own health system. It's challenging, and frankly, the challenge isn't so much on the side of psychiatry. The challenge is on the side of primary care. It's hard to change workflows. It's hard to have an integration and support system. So I think that the complete proposal that you and Senator, forgive me,
Cortez Masto
have developed is critical because it front loads reimbursement and support for primary care to make this real for the first few years. That's central and a wonderful opportunity.
Well, we look forward to working with you and others on that. I know the chairman and ranking member have talked about things that the Congress has done recently in the mental health area. And certainly I agree with them that the status quo was completely unacceptable. We've failed to provide that mental health safety net. But one of the things that I would just draw your attention to or refresh your memory on is we passed the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act last year. It was Senator Tillis and I were involved in hot and heavy negotiations with Senator Sinema and Senator Murphy on this after the terrible shooting in Uvalde. But one of the most overlooked aspects of that, I think, happens to be one of the most important aspects of it. That is expanding the certified community behavioral health clinics and the funding for that. As you know, there's been a pilot program. Senator Stabenow and Senator Blunt have been taking the leadership on that for many years, and I congratulate them for that. They've really led the way. But we made, I think, the single largest investment in mental health delivery in American history, which is incredible and great. But here's the challenge, Dr. Resnick. Where are we going to find the workforce? Where are we going to try to find the trained physicians, psychologists, counselors, and the like?
It's a great question, and I'm glad you brought it up, Senator. As you all probably know, and we've talked with all of you about over the years, and many of you have led in this area, we have a graduate medical education crisis in the United States as well, and psychiatry is a part of it, but it's really across all specialties where we are now seeing shortages. Patients are facing long wait times. I think about this in a few ways. So there's the front end, as you mentioned, training more physicians and non-physician clinicians and nurses, et cetera. We need more DME dollars. We need support for that big bill that will help to accomplish that. Training physicians does take a while. We need immigration reform and additional resources for the Conrad 30 program to help to grow that as well. That provides critical physician access in cities around the country. I also think about workforce at sort of the tail end of the pipeline. I'm worried because as I look at my colleagues around the country, these soaring rates of burnout the last few years, and we know all the things that contribute to that. But if we continue to have health plans adding burdens to physicians, whether it's prior auth, whether it's inaccurate directories, We've got 1 in 5 physicians telling us that they're likely to retire in the next 2 years. So we could acutely lose a lot of that workforce too. So it's important that we think both about the sort of training end and about getting those obstacles and burdens out of the way so we retain the workforce we have.
Thank you. And of course, that applies, as you indicated, not just to physicians, but to allied healthcare professionals. And
Christmas 740, what's up, brother?
Part of the problem that we made an investment in safer schools too, because that's where most of the mental health problems, I believe, are likely to be identified and then referred for the kind of care that
Take
the
screws
kids
out
need
the gas keys.
to get well and not get sicker and sicker and be a danger to themselves and perhaps others. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank my colleague and my colleague who spent a lot of time on these mental health issues and with Senator Stabenow has been doing some good work, is making a very important point. And that is we've got a big challenge ahead of us, some serious lifting with respect to workforce. And that's why Senator Crapo and I so appreciated the chance to work with the two of you, Senator Stabenow and yourself, on those workforce issues. And the fact is, in the gun safety bill, the reason we were able to get it in was we had taken the time to write black letter law. And we were ready to go, and the two of you spearheaded the effort to build it. I do want to make sure that apropos of my approach to this is I'm going to be all in on these workforce issues, but that is not the same thing as running a ghost network, which is misrepresentation. So we've got to deal with both of these issues, and I look forward to working with my colleagues in a bipartisan way on both of these questions. Senator Grassley is next. Of course.
There's no way to skip to it, right?
No, we got plenty of people. What we'll do, because Senator Grassley has strong views on these issues, we will have Senator Tillis now and then Senator Stabenow. And if other colleagues are on the way, let's get Senator Tillis and Senator Stabenow and Grassley in. And
Part of what I wanted to listen to this hearing about is see if they're going to
Thank
push
you,
any
Mr.
more
Chair.
than
Thank you all for being here. I'm
red
glad
flag
that
mental
Senator
health
Cornyn brought up the
bullshit.
Safer Communities Act. People call it a gun safety bill. I call it a gun safer communities bill because it is an extraordinary investment. And I'm proud that North Carolina is one of the first 10 states to receive the tranche of funding to expand behavioral health access, particularly in rural communities, but across the board. Ms. Myrick, back in 2007, I was diagnosed with an illness that required me to take medications that caused me to have pharmacologically induced mania, followed by clinical depression. So I got a window into mental health that I consider to be a blessing. Had I not had a wife, when I'm in mania, I felt like I could fix any problem anyway. I simply would not have sought a healthcare or a behavioral health professional. And when I was in depression, if I went to a website, went through what you did, I'd have said, what's the use? So we need to understand this has real life consequences, and you're in the worst possible state to have the complexity and maybe even having in the middle of depression, finding out that you have to pay out network costs. So now you've got financial stressors, you've got whatever the underlying condition is. The insurers, the providers, everybody need to understand that. I want to get to getting regulations right. I think if we're punitive, then the resources to the healthcare, to the insurers is going to come from somewhere. And most likely it's going to come from the pockets of patients at the end of the day, or from providers by lower provider rates. So we have to get this right, but we have to do something. And I'm sorry, how do you pronounce your last name?
It's right up.
No, I'm sorry, I got yours.
Giliberti.
Giliberti, okay. What would be wrong with HHS and CMS? I worked for a Big Four audit and management consulting firm for most of my professional career. And for one thing, it's shocking to me that the insurers wouldn't have this as part of their annual audit regimen, that they already don't have within their all of them have internal audits. They have the scale, they have to have it, and compliance. It's shocking to me that they don't have an audit program of record where they're going through their provider networks. So rather than mandating that, why couldn't we move towards mandating to CMS and giving CMS the technology the resources necessary to do it, that we're going to perform audits. We're going to determine, I think in one example of Medicare provider information, that they're about 50% accurate. But what would be wrong with an audit or a review by CMS giving them an F because they have a failing grade and having to publish that on the website? A part of the carrot, and I think a competitive advantage for the insurers would be go to the CMS website, see our rating. We've got an A, B, C grade, 1-star, 2-star. But why not a kind of an incentive for them to just make this a part of standard operating procedure, auditing it, and then getting the underlying information systems that they have in place to get a higher grade? Rather than, because if we come down with a heavy hammer, they're going to comply. But that's also taking their attention away from finding additional providers, driving down cost of insurance, and a number of other things. What would be wrong with a light regulatory regimen as a way to start that I think generally would get bipartisan support?
Well, I think that is absolutely an important component. So it would be a great advance forward.
Yep.
Obviously we'd like the whole piece, but I think that having that would be very, very helpful. CMS has done some auditing, but they didn't identify the plans, which I think is what you're saying, Senator.
Well, and I think if you do that, you're going to find the audit and a test ecosystem very quickly come up with advisory services that are going to go after these companies and figure out how they can accelerate it, get data integrity right, get out of the over-promising and under-delivering that we have today. And I also think you said something that's very important. If you have somebody select a plan, maybe because they looked and saw a very large provider network, and that proves not to be the case, and they have to go out of network, I think that's a legitimate case where the person who sold you the expectation that you had these options, and when you came into crisis, you have those, that should be the insurer's problem, not the insured, the insurer's problem. But to me, those are relatively modest changes that if they're implemented properly, I think could have a significant behavioral impact that benefits the insurer. And I have no more time left, but on the workforce thing, if we want to get this right, it can't be just about educating more doctors because we simply won't get the pipeline. I spend a lot of time, I've got a couple of schools you may have heard of, Duke, Chapel Hill, they train a lot of doctors. They tell me that the outlook is bleak. So if we knock the cover off the ball, we're still not going to have enough. And we're not going to knock the cover off the ball of getting people into this profession if we don't deal with a number of other underlying reasons why people are leaving early or not getting into the profession.
Thank you, Senator
So
Phillips.
those are things we have to talk about if we're seriously going to get it done. Thank you, Mr.
We're
Chair.
going to work with you, Senator Grassley.
I'm a strong supporter of telehealth. Finance Committee Chairman, I helped make it implemented in Medicare. Several states have followed suit in their Medicaid program. While I supported making telehealth permanent for all services, mental telehealth is an important tool to improve access, especially in rural America. So I'm going to give
piss off YouTube a little bit.
To Mrs. Gilberti and another question.
While we're listening to this. So 3 weeks, Bill.
I'm going to state both of these now.
Everything is
Ms. Gilberti, in your written
ran
testimony,
a few
you
rounds
said
through it. Yep,
nearly half
full
of the
functions
adults
checked.
and youth with mental health needs don't receive
Torque down the
treatment.
castle nut and everything
Access
today,
to care
staked
can have
everything.
Many challenges. Has telehealth and investments in
she's
broadband
ready to ride.
helped improve the access issue? And for Mr. Trestman, in your written testimony, you said access to care in rural settings is challenging. You specifically highlighted how telehealth improves access to more timely care. Given the recent expansion of telehealth, are patients getting the best mental health care? And if not, what can we do to improve the quality of care? Mrs. Gilberti?
Yes, absolutely. Telehealth has had a tremendous effect on access. In fact, the story that I told, the young woman actually finally got care using telehealth. So it has disproportionately affected the mental health community. You want to have access to in-person as well, but having telehealth, particularly in rural areas, has definitely been a game changer. We need to extend those flexibilities and make them permanent. We also need to worry about licensing between states because that becomes a problem as the emergency ends.
Dr. Dress.
Senator, thank you. And thank you for your work in this issue. It is enormously challenging. And as Mr. Giliberti had said, the benefits of telehealth during the pandemic have been demonstrated. They are substantial. Many people are in rural areas simply unable to meaningfully come to us.
I'm gonna throw an anti-safety on this one.
Without taking off days of work. Many don't have paid medical. They lose a lot of money coming to see us. The opportunity with telehealth is really substantial, providing appropriate care. The data is still evolving as to who is best served in person, who is adequately
This one,
or
I had some extra parts in the
appropriately
handle.
served by
Yeah,
video,
I pulled out the damn
and who is
insulation
adequately
piece that I had in
served
there.
by
So
audio
it fucking
only in
rattles
what
around.
conditions. But in my own experience, and I still see a lot of patients, I have had insights into people's lives by seeing them in their homes that I otherwise never would have gotten if they traveled to me. So I've had
Sight tool,
opportunities that have
couple of things.
benefited both me as the doctor
Now no
as
rattle.
well as our patients
Right.
by having access to
A
them
little bit from the
in a
stall.
timely way, in a way that doesn't put additional burdens of cost and time on them, and that gets
Sure, what's
allow
up?
me
Throw it
to
out
see
there.
them in the environment in which they live. Thank you.
You know me, I'll run about anything as long as it looks good.
I've heard from
It
Iowans
works.
about the challenges finding
Again, I don't give a shit if it looks
network
bad, as long as it
providers,
works.
including mental health services. There are many reasons for the bad provider directories. Even the best information may not be user-friendly.
Pulled the right one the first
Patients may
time.
have to navigate pages and pages of information. For any of you witnesses that want to comment on this question, are government regulations or incentives preventing the private sector from solving this problem? And I don't care which one of you or two of you comment on it. Okay.
I would say the lack of standardization is a problem. So, and several panel members discussed this. The fact that a provider may have to, whether it's a physician provider, mental health provider of any type, may have to deal with literally dozens of health plan requirements that come at them with different elements, different times, different submission standards, different expectations, and then have to repeat that over and over again every time something is potentially wrong. It's just a burden that they can't absorb, even the largest organizations. And that's what we see in our,
I'll try
in our
to do
work.
this as
We have to
clean as
fix
I
the
can possibly
accuracy
do it.
problem together.
Thank you, Senator Grassley. We have to call a lot of audibles around here, and because
And it kills me,
Senator
G2.
Casey's
You guys got to
graciousness,
deal with all that
Senator
fucking
Stabenow will
horseshit.
go
And then it's
next.
getting worse on top
Thank
of
you
what
so
you
much,
guys
and thank you
already have to
to
fucking
all
deal
of you.
with.
This is so important that we actually have accurate provider directories, and this is just part of the whole big picture. I remember back in this committee when we were writing the Affordable Care Act, and I authored the provisions on mental health parity, and that we're still finding this. And I mean, it's in every way, we are coming back all the time. Healthcare above the neck not being
That's still
treated
fine,
as
too.
well as healthcare below the neck. And Ms. Mark, thank you for your testimony and sharing with us. I'm sorry you had to go through all of this. I do want to expand a couple of things because I'm all in, Mr. Chairman, on what you want to do. Absolutely all in. I do want to stress, as Senator Cornyn was talking about, that we have made progress. And frankly, one of the alternatives, I would love, Ms. Mike, for you to be able to contact your local certified community behavioral health clinic. They're in areas now where we have them fully funded. They're funded like healthcare. You can walk in the door. A third of the time in Michigan, one of the 10 states where we're fully funding it, a third of the time people are seen immediately. And people are seen within 10 days and required, and there's a whole bunch of things there. But we have 10 more states coming out in the beginning of the year. We're moving to get all the states engaged. Largest investment in permanent mental health funding ever for the country that is coming. And so step by step, this is part of the answer. It's not the whole answer.
Yeah, Chambered, he's up in
They want to put up ghost registries, go to your
Tommy
CCDHC and
land.
we'll get you some care. And so as a start. So But I want to talk, and certainly we can come back to that, but I wanted to follow up also on the issue of providers, because we have the provider networks, we have these ghost lists, and then we just don't have enough providers. Right. And so, and we know this. And one of the things I so appreciated that we worked on last year, Senator Daines and I, as co-chair of a workforce working group that Senator Wyden and Senator Crapo set up, a really important part of our mental health work. We actually did a few things, but there's more things to do. We were able to get a small number of graduate medical education slots, 200 slots, and half of those for psychiatry. Small, but first time we designated psychiatric slots. And so that was something. We were able to get Medicare coverage for licensed professional counselors and marriage and family therapists. But I wanted to ask Ms. Giliberti, one of the things that Senator Barrasso and I have introduced and it's been around for a long time relates to social workers. And we have the Improving Access to Mental Health Act as it relates to Medicare beneficiaries being able to access social workers and the complete set of services they provide, as well as appropriately compensating social workers. And so I wonder if you might speak to that. That seems to me that's a big hole we have here when we're talking about providers in mental health as well. And how could this help meet the demand?
Function test this.
Well,
and have to
absolutely.
lock
Social
code
workers are
everything.
critical. You know, as I talked about how hard it is to find providers, they're particularly helpful if you have a chronic health condition or you have a disability and you've got to find multiple providers. Social workers can help you with that coordination. They provide treatment, as you mentioned, and we don't have enough people doing that. So they provide an important role there. They're very important with the social determinants of health, right? We know that housing, food insecurity, transportation, all those things affect people. Social workers can help people get connected and really serve underserved communities who disproportionately are not able to access those kinds of things, and it affects health and mental health. And they're important in integrated care, which we've talked about today. They provide some of those services, they coordinate care. So social workers have an important role to play, and we definitely need them in that continuum of care.
Thank you so much. In limited time,
damn trigger is so
Dr. Trussman, just a couple
worn
of things.
in.
One, in
Can't
our
remember who
discussion
made this
draft
trigger.
on workforce, Senator Daines and I proposed raising physician bonus payments in shortage areas and allowing non-physician providers to receive bonus payments, really focused on rural
This thing's just fucking
and
better smooth.
underserved areas. Any thoughts on that? And also CCBHCs, any comments you would have on that as part of what we need to be doing?
Senator Stabenow, yes, and yes. The short answer clearly, having additional compensation and encouragement
safety
for
out,
people
AMB safety
to
in.
join us in rural areas is phenomenally valuable. Helping them pay down their sometimes profound student loans, hundreds of thousands of dollars, is an enormous incentive to allow them to do what they want to do in the first place, but physically can't because of their financial status. And with regard to the new access
Safety's
issues,
functioning good.
opportunities, these are phenomenal programs. Our challenge will be, where do you go for an FQHC? Where do you go to these? When do you go in network? When do you go for Medicaid?
This
Helping
was
us
the first
understand what-
80% AR
Well,
that
the
I ever
great thing
built.
is FQHCs and
Things
our
had
multiple
fucking God knows how many rounds in it.
are now funded structurally the same. It's the same. High quality standards, full Medicaid reimbursement and so on. And what we're seeing is that they are oftentimes together at the same site, which is really the long-term goal. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
This one's just a regular old 5.56 223.
Is going to be next. And
It's
so we're
believe it or not, that was built. It's
Senator Casey.
80%.
Next would be
And 80% Anderson lower. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's an Anderson.
Brown
80%
and
lower.
Senator Bennett in order.
The upper on it's full PSA all the way through.
Mr. Chairman, thanks very much and happy birthday.
Thank you.
I know
I've
that
got upwards of
might have been
3,000
indicated
rounds
earlier.
that gun without a fucking hiccup.
I won't sing. Don't worry about it. I want to thank the panel for being here, and I'll direct my. I think I have
I've
two
had people
questions.
say some shit about PSA, and I'm like, fuck, I can pretty much wrap that one around the tree and it just still runs, so I ain't
just
arguing with
wanted
it.
to thank you and the whole panel for the work you're doing. As many of you know,
Give me a minute, I gotta
so
grab
many of our
this.
colleagues in both parties support making investments to shore up the number of mental health providers and integrate physical and mental health. Last year, for example, last Congress, I should say, Senator Cassidy and I introduced a bill called the Healthcare Capacity for Pediatric Mental Health Act. It was a bipartisan bill to increase investment in children's behavioral health integration, also workforce development and health system infrastructure. As your testimony indicated, so many people don't have access to that integrated care yet, and the process of finding a mental health provider can be overwhelming for people suffering from mental health challenges. Someone who needs help has to sort through provider lists and make lots of phone calls to find a provider with affordable pricing and availability. I know you've covered this. It's especially hard when these lists have countless errors in them. One constituent who reached out to my office was already very well acquainted with a top health system, but it still took her months to find a mental health provider for her daughter. As you indicated, you get calls from family and friends for that kind of help. So I guess my first question is, how can we work together to help people find the provider who has both availability as well as one that accepts insurance? And I know this is by way of reiteration, but I think it bears emphasis.
Yeah, I think that, well, just to talk about integrated care for a moment, if you go to primary care, most of those are in network, right? So that's a way that if we could expand that, we would have more providers that it would be easy for a family with a child, they'd already be there to be able to get that care in network. So that'd be one way. But then of course we need these directories to be accurate. So we need audits, we need them to be using their claims data. If there's no claims, they're not seeing people, right? With the shortages that we have and the mental health crisis for children in particular, if they're not seeing patients, we know that they're not in network. So they need to clean up those provider directories, make them very clear, and that will help people find care. And then we need to expand integrated care because I think most families would just love to be able to go to their pediatrician and get the care.
Yep. The other question I had was, how can we help people find primary care practices that offer this integrated mental health care, such as practices that have telehealth partnerships with mental health providers?
I think that would be very helpful to have on the directories when a primary care practice has integrated care capacity. And I think that the barriers that we see often are just that the rates at this point, we just need to put more financing into integrated care as well if we really want to see it happen.
Great. Mr. Chairman, thanks. I'll yield back my time.
I thank my colleague. The next three in order of appearance would be Hardin, Brown, and Bennett. And those three.
Yeah, Liam, what's
right
up, brother?
here, let's see. That would then mean Senator.
Does anyone else find it funny Democrats are even talking about mental health as crazy as those bastards actually are?
It seems like we actually have two issues here.
Actually, no, I
One
don't
is the
think
ghost
crazy.
networking, which could be false advertising. And Ms. Myrick, your experience is so typical. Thank you for sharing it. It takes courage to do so. Just thank you for doing so. Second is access itself, because Ms. Myrick speaks of both the false advertising and the lack of access. And I think you set the tone for the questions, if you will. Now, one thing that I'm struck by, Dr. Trestman,
This is
when I would
the
speak
original
to- I'm a
upper from that
physician.
gun.
So I'd speak to my colleagues back home who are in psychiatry.
Pretty much.
And they would say
I
that
mean,
Medicaid,
I won't stop,
Medicare
man.
rates were so poor.
Side shit I've
that
done to
they
it,
gotta
like
pay the
lights,
bills,
4
et
bricks,
cetera,
shit like
so they
that.
typically went to either private
This son
insurance
just
or
runs.
cash pay.
Fucking
And I've
runs
heard
its ass off.
the reimbursement's been mentioned. But one thing that's not been mentioned in this
I love
is
the
that
gun.
traditional Medicare, which actually doesn't have a provider panel per se, that the access is equally poor for the traditional Medicare if you're speaking about something such as mental health providers.
Heat
Is
kills
that a fair
stainless
statement?
steel.
Yes, sir, it is.
If you
I asked
see a
my
good
staff, 'cause
bolt
we did
gun that's got a
literature review
stainless steel
beforehand, but
barrel,
they weren't quite sure if
that's
there had been kind of
probably
a
where you're
crosstab,
at.
if you will, of access
You
for
see something
Medicare
like a
patients
semi-auto
MA
stainless barrel?
versus traditional
Nah.
Medicare. And I wouldn't be
Um,
surprised if they're kind of roughly the same.
Stainless doesn't do well with heat. You want,
Your
your
thoughts on
chrome
that?
mollies,
I
what,
expect that they are, sir.
41.
The challenge in so
41
many
series, I
situations
think.
really is
I'd have to look
once
up.
it's the administrative burden, it's the access.
Orange,
to
what's
management,
up, brother?
And so I think that
Well, anytime
the
you're looking
MA
for
versus Medicare
semi-autos,
plans,
which are going to have a
traditional,
whole lot of
have
heat,
some of the
especially
same challenge.
DI
Now,
guns
theoretically,
like
an
this,
MA plan, if they're challenged to
stainless
increase
is
their
no.
provider panel,
Chrome
they could
mollies,
actually
shit
pay
like
better
that,
than
stuff
Medicare
that can
rates in
handle the
order
heat.
to achieve that. if you will, the Medicare MA model.
Like
if done
Chambers
right,
said, man,
actually
stainless
addresses
steel
the
barrels,
market,
they will wear
issue,
out
correct?
and wear out
Absolutely
quick.
true. And supply and demand. is
Stainless
what this
just doesn't
country
like
is
heat.
built on.
Even
I
welded
don't
stainless
think
does
that
not
has
like heat.
applied appropriately to insurance plans. I think that part of the challenge for us is to come up with an appropriate strategy.
I wish
where
I wish I
mean,
kept track
psychiatrists have told me
of how many damn
repeatedly
rounds I've got through
that,
this fucking gun.
I wish I could afford to be in the insurance plans, in Medicare, in MA, but it
But I
costs me
haven't.
more to deliver the
Oh, I get
care.
that. Believe me, I hear that too. So I'm not disputing that. Dr. Resnick, as you kind of representing the
Shit,
entirety
that's really
of
all I had to do.
healthcare,
Those two. I'm waiting on some other
at least
Ken parts to
physicians
come
of
in.
it, you could speak to this.
Those
There's
three.
also a little bit of a quandary.
State the house
that,
nut, state the house nut.
A doctor will
Gas
see a Medicaid patient
Basically
because
everything's
her
staked on
friend
that gun.
asked her if
Everything's
she will
already
see the
staked on
Medicaid
that gun.
patient. She doesn't really see Medicaid, but she's going to see this particular Medicaid patient because her friend asked her to. And so she remains on the Medicaid provider panel, but she doesn't really see it. And I think Ms.
Dude, I don't know
Gilberti said
any
something
of the
along the
C7
lines
rifles.
of they're not seeing
Dude, my
patients,
wife
so
had me
therefore they're
messed
not
up
in the
last night.
network. Technically, that's not
She
necessarily
showed me a
true.
bolt.
If I
Roll
will
play.
see 3
I
patients
went,
a
that
month
looks
on
like an
Medicaid
MP5
because
bolt.
my friend who
And she
I've
went,
known
no,
since
it's
we
a
were both in kindergarten
Chris
together
Vector
calls
something.
me and
I went,
says,
that's
please
not a
see
Chris
this
Vector.
patient for me. Would you accept that as a
Yeah,
valid
you know,
kind
this
of
Chris
occasional
Vector, yada, yada, yada. I said,
Yeah, I
that's
think,
fucking
thank you,
MP5 bolt.
Dr. Senator
Chris Vector
Cassidy.
bolt's going to have to actually slope down.
You know, I have such pride.
And I
in
finally
my
looked up the
colleagues on the
damn
front line
gun, and
around the
it's
country
Chris Vector
who are
makes a
doing their
damn
best every day
for
to take care
Chris
of their communities and the
makes the
patients
MP5
who
clone.
present and
They had them
primary
on
care colleagues who call
Atlantic
over those
Atlantic
patients because
Firearms.
you have identified
I was
payment
like,
rates
I
are
told
an
you that
issue.
was an
And,
MP5.
you know, we
He
have,
went, but it says it's
as
a
we
Chris.
talked
I
about,
said it's
2
a Chris
decades of
MP5
stagnant
clone.
rates in
Damn it!
traditional Medicare. We
she
have
had
Medicare Advantage
she had my
plans.
head
In
messed
some
up
markets,
for
they're
a
so
minute.
consolidated that they're
I
willing
know
to
what
pay
an
less than
MP5
Medicare.
bolt
So let
looks
me ask
like.
you
God
this.
damn it!
My wife, who's a retired general surgeon, once said if they pay you below your
Yeah,
cost,
cold
you can't
hammer
make it
forged
up on
barrels.
volume.
Yep.
That is true.
And so, but to that point, and knowing that there are
Especially
people who,
AKs.
yes,
I
I
really
am on
want
the
something
provider
cold hammer
panel
forged and
because I
chrome
still have
lined.
some
Now,
patients whom I
a
see,
couple of my
and I
barrels
will
aren't. They're
occasionally
still
see
cold
a new
hammer
patient
forged,
under
but
certain
they're just not
circumstances.
chrome
Almost seems
lined.
though that we have to have some
But
sort of threshold to analyze this.
hey,
Does a patient,
as long as you take
yes,
care
they're
of your
open
barrel a
for new
little bit, run
patients,
the damn
but
thing.
how many new
Did everything.
patients will they receive a
Fill
year
you
for this
rounds, you're
particular
okay with an
payment
AK.
plan? Because I think we have to bring sophistication to this analysis as opposed to insurance plans are all bad, for example. Your thoughts on that?
Well, there are physicians on panels who have not seen any patients
I
for
get that.
years, and so that's
Yeah,
fixable by
this
the health plan.
the
If
only
it's a
thing
small number, then I think we need to turn to
the
the
only thing I've
physician.
got with this
And
little
there's a
10 and a
difference
half
between being
is I need to be
contracted,
pushing a
so,
heavier
and we see
pill
this
out
also
that
with
barrel.
physicians at multiple
It's a 1 in
locations, right?
7
Where they're
twist.
contracted at
I
30
need to be
spots,
running
but
like
yes, they go
68
there, but they
grains and
wouldn't want
shit
to be
out.
listed on the
But
directory
I don't
because
have
they
any
literally go
68
cover for a
grains.
colleague every couple of years.
Well,
So
fuckers
I
got
think
really
this is
hard to
where having
find,
a
so I had
low
a
burden
ton of
way for
damn
physicians to have
regular old
input and actually give
55
health
grain
plans when
that I'm
and
running
if they
through it.
want to appear on
Let's
those
face it, I ain't
directories
planning on
based on
sniping with the bitch.
whether they're accepting new patients in that plan.
Well, so with my last,
That's a
over
close
time,
quarters.
but
Get the
5
fuck
more
off me
seconds,
gun.
send me that low burden way. If the AMA's got a way to do that, we could somehow add sophistication to this
Cold hammer
analysis,
forge is the way to go.
we would like to hear from the frontline providers.
We will be convening stakeholders to
You
help
you can take a
to that point.
material
I appreciate that.
and it can be a
Thank
really
you,
good
Dr.
material.
Cassidy.
But
Senator
when you
Cortez Masto.
hammer forge it, you're actually driving the
Chairman,
grain
I think we've
structure
had
of the
this great
material because
discussion.
metal
I had
has a
the
grain
opportunity to
structure.
listen in my office to
If you look at
a
under
lot of
an
the discussion
electron
this morning,
microscope, you can see the different
particularly the
grains
integrated
in
care
a metal.
model
And when you
concept
cold hammer forge
that
them,
we
you're
are talking about
driving
today.
those
And I'm so
grains
appreciative of my
together,
colleague, Senator
tightening
Cornyn,
them up and
asking
tightening them up and
Dr.
tightening them
Trestman a
up.
question about
So
why
you
it's
can take
important.
a metal that's
That's where we need to
okay,
start,
you know,
obviously.
has pretty
Let
good
me ask you this,
properties,
Dr.
and you
Trestman.
can get it
how will
hard
this
as a
integrated
freaking
model
hard as
help
woodpecker
us
lips
alleviate the
by
existing
cold hammer
shortage?
forging.
Would it?
That's what you want.
I
Cold
think
hammer
it'll go a
forge is
long way to help
for
you,
me
Senator, and thank you
for
for
semi-auto
all of your
guns.
work in
Cold
this
hammer
domain.
forge is the way to go.
The opportunity is this.
You know,
If
chrome line, not
we
chrome line, I
partner
could do with either one, but I
psychiatrists with
definitely want a
appropriate
cold hammer
support
forge
staff
barrel
embedding
on an
you
auto
through
gun.
primary care, we can keep
Short
people
guns,
in
fast
primary
twitch.
care without them having to
Unless you're shooting a
physically
big
be
fat
seen
pill
by
out.
psychiatry. One psychiatrist for 2 or 3 hours a week.
Warsaw,
can
a
review
lot of your
panel between
old
40 and
barrels for
60
shotguns and
patients,
shit were
to
Damascus.
provide adequate support to the
Um,
primary care team.
when
so
they
that
made them,
we
when
can
it made a lot of
really
those barrels,
support
believe it
them.
or not, they
Additionally,
took
something that was already
steel and
addressed
basically
was
wrapped it
workforce
around a
burnout, keeping
oh God, I
people
can't
in
remember,
play,
mandrel,
keeping them
and
satisfied with
then
their work.
basically
It's morally
welded everything together,
frustrating
and then they could draw the
not to be
material out
able
and make the
to
barrel.
refer someone to care. If
But
you're
see, the
the
thing about
primary care
Damascus
doc,
is
you see
Damascus
someone who needs care, it's beyond your scope.
doesn't flex or
And you
stretch.
can't do it.
It's
These
more of a brittle material.
collaborative
It's very
care
hard.
model and
It's a
other
little bit more
potential
brittle.
models allow
So anything
primary care to do what
Damascus,
they
from
want.
what
Thank
I
you.
know,
Thank you.
you don't want to be
And
throwing
Dr.
any sort
Resnick,
of
I
modern
appreciate
powder
your
stuff.
comments regarding the burnout
It'll
issue
fracture the
and the
barrels and blow them
pre-authorization.
apart.
I just had some doctors in my office
I've
talking
seen
about
some
the
beautiful
concerns
old
about this
shotguns.
prior pre-authorization
They were
requirement
Damascus that
coming
had
through.
they were actually acid
So
etched and
thank you.
everything.
But
And man, they
can
were
I jump
gorgeous.
to, I only have about 5
But
minutes. I want to
they were
jump
wall
to
hangers, unless you were
rural
shooting low
Nevada,
power loads out of it.
which is similar to Northern California. And so let me,
I didn't
Dr.
realize
Burnett,
that
let me ask
till
you this,
years
because
and years ago.
as with the integrated primary
There
care,
was a guy, I was at a
telehealth has
shop one
proven to
time. He
be
was trying to sell one
valuable
of his old
tool
shotguns. The dude told him,
for
look,
rural
said,
Nevada in my
all that's
state.
good for is
And
basically a wall hanger, or is it for you
essentially
doing
to also extend our
historical
mental health
period shit where
workforce.
you're not shooting
And
modern
while we're
loads?
making steps in the
So
right
you can do
direction,
that.
I am
It's not
concerned
going
that
to be a
the
bird gun,
telehealth and
not with
expanded
modern
primary
loads.
care alone will not meet our workforce needs, particularly
Yeah, Damascus
in
is
our
great for blades,
rural
man. It's
communities when
hard,
it comes to
but
behavioral
that's
health professionals in
you
the
want a
long term.
decently hard
So in
material
your
for
view,
blades. But believe it or not,
how are
barrels have to
contracting
have
issues
they have to be able to
driving
move a
the
little bit.
supply problem in
They
rural
have to be able
areas?
to
How do we
flex.
address
You've
that?
got barrel harmonics there, and
I
all
would
sorts of
agree
shit
with you
works
that
into an accurate barrel.
despite the huge uptick in telehealth
So
visits, it's not going to be enough to solve the supply problem.
barrel
And
materials, they
as
need
I
to
think a
be,
number of panelists have
certain
mentioned, primary care
specs.
physicians, and I'm one of them, do provide a certain level of mental
But it's
health
wild when you
care,
really
but they too
get
are
into
burning out. They
materials. And
too are aging
I'm not
out.
a metallurgist. I know
So you've got
top
essentially
scratch
stopgap
the surface
measures.
shit just from
And I
being
think
the CWI.
in terms of
Metals
contracting,
are funny,
my
man.
experience across plans, purchasers, and
When you really
providers,
get into
it's
it.
the conditions of participation, including rates.
Well,
but
that's
not
like
limited to
anything
rates,
on one of
that
these
really
guns.
drives whether people want to
If it's
participate
going
or
to
not.
be a
I've
heavy duty
heard
service gun, say if
psychiatrists,
it was
which are
going out
actually
of
a
the field,
relatively
get shit
small
beat out of it,
percentage of the
almost
total
everything
mental
in it needs to be hand
providers, it just
forged.
costs too much to do
Even
it.
your
I would
aluminum
bring
lowers,
back a thought of integrated care.
no
We've talked a
billet,
lot about
hammer
integrated
forged,
care
you
in
name
terms of
it, hammer forged all the way through.
medical and behavioral integration. There's also an integrated care model where
I
physicians
can't
and
remember
local
what
specialties
steel
practice
because
under
my
one
boss makes a
organizational
lot of
structure
knives.
in an
I can't
organization
remember
that's
what
large enough to provide
steel he's been
telehealth, large
working
enough
with
to provide data
been
analytics,
fucking
and
tough.
large enough to essentially cover some of the shortages through better contracting or better load management within the group. So I
Where do
think
you send it over?
that's hard in a rural area because people don't concentrate that way in terms of practice very, very well.
Thank you. Dr. Resnick, did you have a comment?
Well, Senator, I'm really glad you brought up contracting because when we look at the data, and AMA produces these data every year, most areas around this country have highly concentrated insurance markets where one or two plans cover the vast majority of patients in that area. So they're really in rural Nevada or in big urban centers, there's not meaningful contracting. And we have physicians who have a big panel of patients and the insurer just sends them a letter at the end of the year that says, thanks very much.
Rebar
or it's
barrel.
really take it or leave it contracts that they present that increasingly are lower and lower percent.
get away with it.
Medicare. So it is not a level playing field between the physicians who actually want to be contracted to be able to take care of their patients and the health plans.
Well, and it sounds like we need another panel of health plan providers to be able to talk to, and I look forward to that opportunity. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Brown will be next, and I understand one of our colleagues on the Republican side is coming back as well. But with that, unless there are people we don't know about, we will wrap up, and there's a vote on.
Show this for a sec. Oh, hold on. Damn it. Yeah, these guys are turning down barrels, baby. These are building it up. All right, we got about 15 minutes for the House and PA comes back in. We'll see what these douches do. And let me check. Dude, I have got to learn how to work on a damn manual lathe like that. Oh, hold on. Let's see something. Come on. And one channel had her going already, and the other one doesn't. Let me check on something real fast. We'll kill a little time till they come back in, and then we'll see what in the hell they're talking about with their stuff. See if they actually discuss any of these damn proposed bills, or if they just blow through them, call them the second reading, and pass them on. I'm kind of expecting that's what they're going to do in PA. Is just, hey, second reading, and then go. No, that's nothing we really feel like watching. PA House isn't back up. North Carolina House of Reps is in recess. They ain't doing nothing. Four Boxers Diner has a video I don't have to watch later. Just from his tag. Apparently Amy Coney Barrett saw something that other people missed in something, and she might go shit in someone's cornflakes. And if she does, I desperately want to see it. To me, that man, there shouldn't be a federal, district, any of those courts where you can't, listen to what they're doing. We can listen to Supreme Court arguments and all this stuff, but some of these circuits do not want their stuff listened to, which is kind of annoying. So far, So far, the Senate's real quiet today about any kind of gun control shit, which in some ways kind of scares me. Just because of the way these dummies do stuff. Yeah, manual lathe operations I need to learn, man. I've got to learn how to cut internal and external threads. Be able to do more barrel work, basically, and not have to kill myself trying to do it. That 12.5-inch AK pistol, when I cut the barrel to make that gun, because I built that gun up from scratch. It was a pain in the ass. Oh, dude, I've got to get over to one of the colleges. I've got to try to find the time to get over there and actually take some machine tool classes. I mean, I've played a little bit with a lathe, but I got a long way to go. I can throw this safety in a box of stock parts. Oh. Damn sure tell that bolt's had a lot of fucking rounds put in it. It's going. If I was actually working and charging for shit, I could have made a couple $100 just doing that shit. What's this hack talking about? Take you now to a regular shit.
implemented by the Biden administration. It is an essential element in giving our nation what we need to be successful in the future. Without permitting reform, American energy will be continued to be stalled, jeopardizing our security here at home.
Well, here's another thing to
as
pay
well as
attention
our
to,
allies
kids, because they're
abroad.
still arguing about
Without
this shit.
permitting reform, communities across America will struggle as they are denied access to the good-paying jobs that they need and are capable of doing. Without permitting reform, America will not build at all. The same country that
They
mined
keep
the
fucking
coal,
around, man.
that
They are
made the
going
steel,
to
and that built
completely
the
crash this
democracy
economy.
and led the way for industry across the world will be held back by
Now, wait a minute,
endless
Hobags. You said
review
you were going to be in
processes.
recess till 1:15.
Continuous
Now you say
and
it's 1:30.
continuing court challenges and crippling regulations
Damn,
that
Pennsylvania
limit
House.
our ability for the to be the world leader that we know
Mike,
we
go
are.
drive to the House. Go
My state of
slap
West
everybody in
Virginia,
there.
which is synonymous with energy generation, we have long seen the negative effects created by a permitting process that is designed to stall rather than to produce or create. There are multiple real-world examples of how our broken environmental review and permitting process is holding up my state of West Virginia's ability to move forward and is impacting multiple sectors important not only to the people of my state, but also to our national economy. In the transportation sector in West Virginia, there's Corridor H. Corridor H is a critically important highway that West Virginia needs to help commerce flow and to jumpstart the economy in the central part of our state and to encourage our growing tourism industry. In the manufacturing sector, there is Nucor Steel, an innovative, cutting-edge steel and steel products company that can't, as yet, build their plant as quickly as the Biden administration keeps creating new emissions guidelines. And then in the energy sector, there's the Mountain Valley Pipeline, a 304-mile-long natural gas pipeline that is on the brink of completion, over 90% completed, yet it is unable to deliver its needed contribution to American energy independence due to the regulatory burdens and endless legal challenges that have gone on longer than the actual construction of the pipeline itself. These are just three examples in the state of West Virginia. Think about the national impact created by outdated permitting processes, the damage inflicted on our communities and our economy, and the opportunities we're losing because of an administration that champions red tape, feeds frivolous lawsuits, and whose agencies celebrate delays that lead to the total abandonment of critical projects. It just doesn't make sense, quite simply. Even the renewable energy projects and manufacturing efforts central to the Biden administration's agencies are being held up in permitting purgatory. President Biden has long pledged that he will build our country back better. Well, newsflash, Mr. President, you can't build back better if you can't build at all. The fallout created by a broken environmental review and permitting process further strains our sputtering economy, drives up energy prices for consumers, negates good-paying jobs for hardworking Americans, and really jeopardizes our ability to build into the future. Now, as my constituents in West Virginia would say, well, what are you going to do about it? Well, from conversations we've already started in the EPW committee, I will soon be introducing legislation in tandem with my colleague, Senator Barrasso, that delivers on the environmental review and permitting process reform that our country needs. This legislation will benefit all projects, renewable, conventional, surface transportation, manufacturing, all of the above. This legislation will mandate enforceable timelines with clear time limits and predictable schedules for environmental review and consequences when agencies fail to reach these decisions in a timely fashion. This legislation will fashion guidelines that process and decide legal challenges to projects expeditiously instead of creating a sea of endless litigation. The legislation will actually amend the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, and NEPA, and fix the obstacles holding our country back from the prosperity we deserve while maintaining of course, maintaining environmental protections. I will emphasize, as I have many times in the past, that any tangible, lasting environmental review and permitting solutions must be accomplished through regular order. Backroom deals will not cut it. In fact, they will only lead to confusion among the American public and buyer's remorse among the participants. We have forged the blueprint for bipartisan compromise through the EPW committee time and time again, and this process should be no different. I encourage my colleagues in both chambers, on both sides of the aisle, as well as President Biden, to heed the calls from communities across the country on the urgent need for environmental review and permitting reform, and join in our efforts to deliver the modifications that America's employers, workers, and consumers need. I look forward to the continued debate on environmental review and permitting reform, and while always maintaining our shared goal of moving America forward. And with that, I yield the floor and see my colleague who's been very instrumental in all of this and as we work together with our colleagues, Senator Barrasso.
Madam President.
Senator from Wyoming.
Thank you, Madam President. It's a joy and privilege to join my colleague from West Virginia, Senator Capito, on the floor today to talk about legislation that we'll be introducing tomorrow.
Okay, so you're just running around
It's
debating
about
this
permitting.
damn
And I come to the floor to talk
regulatory
about
reform
ways
shit.
to lower prices for American families and restore our country to energy dominance. And
These
of course,
fuckers,
the
man,
way
who
to
voted
achieve
for
this is by fixing
Biden,
our
man.
broken permitting process. There is a lot of work.
If
that
they're
has to be done.
still,
There is
hey,
bipartisan
Biden's the
support
greatest
to do
president,
it.
man, they
So
are
she'll be introducing,
unsavable.
along with me, our legislation tomorrow. And this legislation is going to streamline a very complicated permitting process. It's going to speed up American infrastructure, energy, as well as mining projects. Taken together, this legislation will address fatal flaws in today's federal permitting process. Now, the current system moves in very slow motion. Too often, as Senator Capito said, there is no motion at all. Things are stopped in their tracks. Today's process
things are stopped in
forces
their tracks. You gotta
project
put the mo-
developers to endure a maze of regulations, mountains of paperwork, expensive studies, and bureaucratic foot dragging. It takes an average of 4.5 years now just to complete an environmental impact statement for one single project. In some cases, it can take a decade or more to get final approval for a project. And even if a project makes it through, the regulatory roadblocks to get a permit will inevitably
That's the only
be
reason these
challenged
people can talk
in court.
about, well, nuclear is so much
Project
more
opponents
expensive
are
than the
skilled at exploiting our broken
fossil
permitting
fuel or
process
whatever.
to stop
yeah, 'cause
all
you
progress.
fucking have all these damn
Litigation
regulations
can
that are
drag
useless,
on
and
for years
all they do
and
is
cost
run the price
millions
up.
and millions of dollars. In my home state of Wyoming, activists are suing to cancel hundreds of federal oil and gas permits. Now, these permits were issued after years of environmental reviews. They're frivolous, the lawsuits, but they're happening all across the country. The longer it takes to get a permit, the more a project costs. The more it costs, the more likely a developer will either pull the plug or just give up before even starting.
Gee, you think?
The result of all of this is that energy prices go up. People feel the pain. Because when investments aren't made, jobs don't materialize, projects of national importance don't get built. And I'm talking about projects like oil and gas wells, pipelines, transmission lines, wind and solar farms, power plants, roads, tunnels, bridges, mines. To see what I mean, Madam President, take a look at this chart from The Economist. I call it cancel culture. It shows that for the past several years, more miles of interstate gas pipelines have been canceled. The past several years, more miles of interstate gas pipelines have been canceled than have been built. Let me repeat that. This shows past several years, more miles of interstate gas pipelines have been canceled than have been built. You know, we used to be able to build things in this country. Not anymore. Not that we don't know how, is that we're not being allowed. Shouldn't take longer to permit a project than to actually build it. In too many instances, it does. The American people inevitably lose when that happens. The permitting process must change so we can lower costs for families and unleash American energy. We can't keep today's broken process and expect to stay ahead of rivals like China. Taken together, the legislation that Senator Capito and I are introducing is going to streamline the permitting process while preserving environmental standards. This will put America back in the lead. Project developers need to expect a system that is predictable and delivers a timely answer. Our legislation will do that by sticking to 4 basic principles. First, real reform must benefit the entire country, not a narrow range of special interests. Our bills are technology and fuel neutral. By that we mean we don't put our thumb on the scale for politically favored
My child.
executive branch from hijacking the process to meet its own policy preferences. The energy bill that I'm going to introduce focuses on streamlining improvements to produce more American energy and more American mineral resources. It's going to lower costs for families. It's going to enhance America's energy security. It's going to reduce reliance on China,
It's just fucking
on
retarded
Russia,
that he even
and
has
on
to go,
other
has to go to the Supreme
adversaries
Court.
for
It really
energy
is.
as well as key minerals. A key aspect of my energy
Yeah,
bill is
and
to
Warsaw's
resume
right. Some of
federal
these states are
onshore
just going
and
to continue to
offshore
give them the
oil and
finger.
gas leases. Now, the Biden administration
And then if
has
these states,
tried from
there
day
is
one to
here's
block
a
access
thought.
to
If these
federal
states
lands
just
and
keep
waters,
giving the Supreme
regardless
Court
of the
finger,
law.
and these other courts do,
We cannot allow any administration
what's the process for
to
getting them in line?
deny, defy, and disregard the law.
Hey, you're
My
not
bill
supposed to be
also
down
will
here.
speed up the production of critical
You're not.
minerals used in renewable and battery technologies.
Come on, it's cold.
Our
down here. Go
country is
upstairs.
blessed with large mineral deposits, some in your home state.
You
Madam
got socks
President.
on.
My home state in Wyoming
Upstairs. Go
in
watch
particular.
television.
We have large reserves of coal, uranium, rare earths, and other minerals. Yet it often takes over 10 years in the United States to get a mining permit. Our competitors in China move much faster, as do our northern neighbors in
Yeah,
Canada.
what is SCOTUS going to
Unlocking
do?
domestic mining means that
Send
we will no
troops to
longer
go
have to
to the
rely on
governor's
China
house
and
and
Russia for critical
Arrest
minerals.
that motherfucker for being a douchebag.
Finally, my bill will ensure the affordability and reliability of our electric grid. We will have American energy that is affordable, that is reliable, and that is
We're the
available.
only first world country
Now, the House recently passed the
that has all the
Lower
natural
Energy
resources you
Costs
can
Act.
possibly have, and we
The
refuse
Senate now has an
to be
opportunity
energy
to pass our
independent.
own legislation. We can pass bipartisan legislation that
Hey,
unleashes
little boy, I
American
can't hear
energy,
you.
boosts our international competitiveness, creates jobs, and
One,
lowers
that's not your
prices.
sock. That's your sock.
This starts with
And you
today,
still only have
fixing
one sock
today's
and you're in
broken
shorts. And
permitting
it's cold.
process.
Upstairs, go.
Now, Democrats said last year that this reform is necessary. Senator Capito and I are bringing solutions to the table. Democrats are serious about fixing the broken process. Meaningful reform
Right.
is possible. Thank you, Madam President, and I yield the floor.
Oh, God.
Madam President,
Senator from Alaska.
Madam President, I want to thank Senator Capito, Senator Barrasso for their leadership on an issue that matters
Okay,
to
now you have
every
two sides.
single
You
American.
still don't have your
And
pants.
this is one of these issues, Madam
You're still
President,
in
where
shorts.
the Congress of the United States should be coming
You wanna
together
come hang out with Daddy when
in
you get you some
a
pants on.
bipartisan way to make sure we have a permitting system that
Come on,
enables
do
us to
something.
build things. Every kind of thing we need: roads, bridges, ports, energy, renewables, oil and gas. The system is broken.
Come on, let's go find this
Everybody
long man.
knows it. And Madam President, I like to show this photo when I'm talking
You wanna
about
come hang out in the shop? Come on.
permitting reform. Why am I showing this very iconic photo of some men here building the Empire State Building? Because we all know that one of the great things about America is we used to be able to build things, big things, on time. 410 days to build the Empire State Building. The Hoover Dam took less than 5 years to build. Little closer to home to me, the 1,700-mile Alaska-Canada Highway, what we call the Alcan Highway, through some of the world's most rugged terrain, 11 months. This was the great thing about America. With the best workers in the world, we built huge things on time, on budget, but not anymore, Madam President, not anymore. And one of the things that, I don't want to be too partisan here, but one of the things that we all know we need is permitting. I am obsessed with this issue. But I will tell you this, every time, and it's probably going to happen again, we have a big permitting opportunity, a big permitting bill on the floor. What happens? It usually is a battle between the men and women who build stuff, the unions who build things. They want permitting reform. They want to be back in action like these men decades ago. The men and women who build things want it. The radical far left environmental groups hate it because they want to block building anything in America. They want to block producing any energy in America. And unfortunately, when it's a choice between the men and women who build stuff and the far left radical enviros on permitting, my Democratic colleagues almost every single time go with the radical left, not the men and women who build things. I hope it doesn't happen again, but it happens all the time. Madam President, here's the thing. As I mentioned, our country used to build incredible things on time. Now we are a country that is tangled up in red tape. A simple highway in the U.S. can now take as long as 19 years to permit and build. In Alaska, we are ground zero for these kind of projects that the permitting is delayed. Far left, lower 48 environmental groups sue to stop, and they take advantage of NEPA. Let me give you an example, Madam President. We had a gold mine in Alaska called the Kensington Mine. If you included the litigation of the far left environmental groups, it took 20 years to permit. 20 years. How does that help a country? How does that help my state? How does that help workers? It doesn't. The only people who like that are the far left environmental groups and Xi Jinping and Putin, who want to make sure America can't produce. So what's happened, Madam President, is the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA as we call it, has been abused. It was a great idea when it was passed in the late 1960s. It required builders to engage with the public, consider the environmental impacts of important projects. But back then, it was usually a couple hundred pages, a NEPA review that would take about a year. Madam President,
Now they bumped it for another 15 minutes.
1,000 pages, takes several years for the NEPA process
Dragging
to
their
move
feet.
forward. And we have, again, some of our great leaders in our building trades.
Lib shooter in
This is
Atlanta
James
active.
Callahan,
Oh,
General
shit,
President of the International Operating Engineers. Here's what he said recently on a piece of legislation that I moved forward last year, a CRA, on a permitting issue. Since its modest beginnings, NEPA has evolved into
30 chairs, non-squeak, 15 non-wobbly tables.
A lot of people trying to walk into the area. Of course, it's a very busy part of Midtown at a very busy part of the day. Of course, we've heard about the multiple injuries and one person dead at this point. Of course, if you look behind me, Jefferson, can you zoom in over there? You can see the large crowd of police. A lot of them are standing by. Every now and then, you'll see them kind of pick up the speed and run to a different area. It's still an active area. It is shut off to try to keep everyone safe as they try to get the situation under control. Back to you.
Tracy, just want to ask you to help set the scene for the area you're in. We see that enormous amount of police presence. We know this is sort of the area where the Google office building is, the Epicurean Hotel. What other businesses, restaurants, what are you seeing around you to give people sort of some context to the location?
This is saying one dead. So.
Well, I can see there's a Veni Vidi Vici restaurant. There's Farm Burger. Of course, this is the time of day where people are walking around, grabbing lunch right across the street from us. There's Dean's at Midtown. There's a Shell station. I mean, this is on Spring Street, which is always a very busy street any time of day, especially around the lunchtime hour. So right now, we're just kind of watching everybody make their way. You can see people still walking through the roped off area, just trying to get to where they need to be, as police are, of course, trying to get everyone into a safe spot as they try to take a very active situation and keep it safe for everyone who's around here.
Tracy, you're right in the middle of all this right now. First of all, please stay safe. You know, are you seeing police going around to some of these businesses, these buildings, to check on locked doors to make sure that the suspect isn't in any of these buildings?
As of now, I think that time not necessarily has passed, but I think they probably already checked this area. Right now, they're kind of set up at different points on the street to just kind of keep abreast of what's happening. And then, of course, there's a large crowd of them working together as they get information from other officers who are in different buildings, kind of telling them what they've already checked and where they need to check next. But right now, I mean, if you look down the street, you can see a marshal's vehicle, a Fulton County Sheriff, you can see MARTA police. I mean, there are police agencies from all throughout the area working together now to try to find the suspect, bring them into custody. Of course, we have the picture of the suspect they're looking for. And right now, everyone around here, they're just trying to get them out of the situation so they can eliminate them and take a look at where the suspect actually is.
I mean, talk about an all hands on deck situation. Tracy's saying even MARTA police are there. 11 Alive's Cody Alcorn talking to us earlier saying, I mean, he saw highway patrol. We have SWAT. We have the sheriff's department, the police, of course. I mean, all hands on deck for this situation.
You think about this in terms of sort of a needle in the haystack search when you're talking about just the area of many city blocks and a part of Midtown where there are so many huge buildings, lots of places to be, to go building to building over many city blocks is tedious and potentially dangerous. And you're talking about so many people in the mix as well. So a challenging situation for all of these responders. I think it's very interesting that 11 Alive reporter Cody Alcorn was talking about sending a drone up, perhaps to get an overview perspective to see maybe anything that might stand out to them in the search for this shooter.
Yeah, I want to check in again with Karis Belger, who is live on the scene. Karis, what are you seeing out there now?
Well, it's still an evolving situation. There are a lot more police cars that are coming in this way and multiple agencies. I just saw another MARTA police car drive up. I'm going to step out so you can take a look here. We managed to get slightly closer up the hill. You can just see the concentration of officers, SWAT team, multiple agencies all the way up that hill by that Einstein Bagels. We're actually not that far from another building, a Whole Foods. There's a Farm Burger where there are people still sitting, still waiting, looking at their phones, trying to get information. And in fact, not too long ago, I happened to speak with a gentleman who works inside the building where all of this took place. He did say to me that he had not been told a lot of information. He was just told to evacuate. But if you could take a look here, we're seeing a lot more agencies pull up. In fact, you can see this armored truck that is also coming up 14th Street where we are located right now. Officers trying to get that vehicle through and also trying to contain the traffic because as you can imagine, is extremely busy right now. And even with these roadblocks, there are still people who are trying to get around and find out what exactly is going on. Still an evolving situation, but we have managed to get slightly closer. I am hoping to speak with some of the officers on scene to try and get a little more information. Once I know more, I will be sure to keep you updated.
All right. Yeah, they have a lot on in their hands right now. Karis, thank you so much. We want to mention right now, we've just got an alert from Atlanta Public Schools that a number of schools are on lockdown. APS is not sharing the specific schools on lockdown, but you can assume they are the ones in the closest proximity to what's going on here in Midtown. So parents, if you have students that are in school in this vicinity, you're probably getting alerts and they'll update you as they can. But as of now, Atlanta Public Schools announcing lockdowns for a number of schools in close proximity to the search for this shooter in Midtown.
And there are, of course, school bus routes that run through that busy area as well. So I imagine those might be impacted as well.
Certainly.
So parents, you can reach out to your schools and figure out kind of what's going on there. Again, APS not saying exactly which schools are on lockdown, but I imagine that this is going to have kind of a ripple effect on a lot of neighboring businesses, buildings, and schools as well.
So we are just about 1 hour into this continuous coverage of an active shooter situation in Midtown. If you're just joining us, Teresa, at 12:37, the first alert came out of an active shooter in Midtown from Atlanta Police. A few minutes later, they said that they had multiple people hurt. We can now confirm to you through Atlanta Police that there were 4 people shot. 3 of them survived, are on their way or at Grady Hospital as we speak. 1 person we confirmed has died in this situation. The shooter is on the run at this moment, and police are looking for them. A tremendous response from a number of jurisdictions, including state troopers, Fulton County SWAT, Atlanta Police, MARTA Police, and others coming in to help in the search for this shooter.
And Cheryl, important to note as well that even though the suspect is on the run, police have confirmed that there have been no additional shots fired since that initial incident. So they are still trying to look for that person. We have multiple crews on the scene. Doug Richards live for us right now. Doug, not sure if you can hear us. I know this is a developing situation there, but where are you and what can you tell us from where you are?
We're on West Peachtree at the corner of 15th Street. West Peachtree is a one-way street going in this direction. There's no traffic coming from that direction, which is where, when Tyson zooms in, you will see the police and public safety activity. What we see up there appears to be 3 or 4 dozen units of police, ambulance, of some fire rescue units. And what we see in addition are sort of the silhouettes of law enforcement individuals moving at a casual pace, looking like they're waiting to be told what to do. And what we don't see is any sort of frantic, active individuals scurrying from location to location in any kind of a search that one might expect to see in an active shooter situation. Could be, of course, that all that stuff happened before we got here. So what we see now is kind of a waiting game, or what at least appears to be a waiting game, as the street, which is one of Atlanta's busiest arteries, West Peachtree Street, is closed off to traffic, as is 15th Street, 14th Street, which are east-west arteries, also very busy, and additional streets sort of surrounding this area. So Tyson, the photographer, has moved into the middle of West Peachtree Street to give you sort of a better perspective. You can see the ambulances in the front, though we don't know to what extent, if any of those folks are actually treating people. We suspect that they are on standby. In addition, obviously, to the law enforcement crews that you see behind them, both in a vehicular sense and in a manpower or woman power sense, folks standing and walking through the area, trying to negotiate what to do next. And in an active shooter situation, that sort of strategizing can be fluid. And that's what that looks like as we look directly south on West Peachtree Street from 15th Street and West Peachtree. Back to you.
All right, Doug, thank you so much. We also have Tracy Amick Pier live on the ground right now. Tracy, I'm trying to get an idea of where our crews are. Doug's saying he's over on the 15th Street side. Where are you right now, and what are you witnessing?
So I'm at Spring Street and 14th Street. We're right by the Whole Foods and the Farm Burger. And we just talked to a gentleman. He actually went to go work out at around noon today and is coming back. He said he had a meeting and he can't get into his apartment building. It's the Icon. And I said, well, how many people live there? He said it's 39 floors of people who either can't get back in their building right now or are inside and locked down as well. And earlier I spoke about the fact that, you know, it's actually another reporter of ours, Brittany, her child is in daycare here. There are other mothers with other daycares. So people can't get into this right now. People can't get into the area. It's a really stressful time for everyone who is here, and it's as safe as possible right now. I mean, police are everywhere, but of course, until the suspect is captured, everyone is on edge and everyone is being kept out of the perimeter here. Of course, more and more police keep showing up, adding to the group, and of course, spreading out to try to cover this whole area. But when you think about it, there are so many buildings right near where we are right now, so many businesses, so many different apartment complexes and restaurants. So if you imagine all the different floors, all the different areas where a suspect could be, trying to figure out where the suspect is, it's quite a feat right now. And they've got to lock down as much as possible. We'll be here, of course, at the perimeter trying to figure out what's going on and to bring you all the information as soon as we get it. Back to you.
Tracy, you make a really important point. As a mom, my heart just kind of dropped when you said that. There are a lot of daycares in the area. And also we know that's the same situation for parents who have now learned that their kids who are in Atlanta Public Schools in that vicinity that are on lockdown. So that means, you know, they can't get to them. And as you mentioned, there's a tremendous police presence and they're working to keep everybody safe. But as a parent, you just want to have your child next to you and you want to see them and you want to know they're okay. So we are thinking about all the families that are in that situation right now, and to think about, you know, the one building with 39 floors and all the people inside, and that multiply that by the number of high rises in this area, you really understand the scope of the number of people impacted, both those who live there, those that work there, and those maybe who had just come in this area for lunch and now are still sheltered in place, kind of in the back of restaurants away from windows as police are searching for this gunman.
And each one of those thousands of people who are in this area right now, sheltering in place, as someone who loves them and is worried about them and can't get to them. I mean, you said that about the daycare. It makes your stomach churn thinking about these moms and dads and guardians who can't get to those kids. Right now, we have 11 Alive's Cody Alcorn on the scene as well. He is on the phone. Cody, wanted to check in with you and see from your perspective if there have been any changes over the last hour you've been there.
Yeah, I can tell you I'm now blocked in. When I got on 15th Street, the SWAT team was just coming in, and now I have SWAT teams on both sides of me. So from Art Center Way, which is the Art Center train station, the mall station, to Peachtree Street, that whole area is closed down. The Atlanta Tactical Medic Team just dropped off some medical SWAT team members. If you're not familiar with that, any SWAT team will have medics within their SWAT team in case someone is injured. Obviously, this is an active shooter situation. No additional shots have been fired, but they know this man's armed. He's already accused of killing one, shooting three others, so they know this is likely not going to end in their terms right now peacefully because they don't know what he's capable of. So what they're doing, it appears, is dropping off these medical task members to each SWAT team. That vehicle just pulled back out and went down the opposite way of Peachtree. So right now what I can tell you is 15th Street is closed and there are still multiple SWAT team members here. Now,
that's right on,
they're
right near
actively going building to building at this point, but I can tell you when I last talked to you, they were getting the drone ready to go up. That drone is now up here off of 15th Street and I believe between 16th Street area. So what it appears right now is they are just trying to find this guy. They have put out the bolos, they put out the pictures. Right now it looks like they are just kind of in standby mode because I don't know if they don't know exactly where he's at this point or if they just have this perimeter established and now they're hoping that their drone, and I'm sure they have eyes up in the sky and possibly on some of these rooftops trying to see if they can see this man moving. Here's the other thing, too, you got to keep in mind. There is a lot of areas where this guy could stay and just post up because he knows he's being actively searched for. So I think someone mentioned it a while ago. It's like a needle in a haystack. This guy could just be propped up somewhere and waiting for this to stop. But I can assure you from what's happened here today, APD, SWAT, Fulton County, every jurisdiction that's here is not going to stop looking. So that's where we're at right now. As I think Doug mentioned, you don't see a lot of people running and a lot of chaos out here. It appears right now they just have a perimeter established, and they're trying just to figure out if the public can help, if they can open out windows from these condos that are here, hotels, parking garages.
No, sir.
That's
Put back.
kind of where
Hey,
right now
put back.
it appears, because again,
Put
they're
it
not
back.
really going door to door looking as far as chaos here. It's just kind of standing by to see if they get a spot on him.
All right, thank you. We want to update you. This is breaking news just into our newsroom. An update from police. Atlanta police say they are now currently aware of 5 shooting victims related to this situation. 4 have been transported to the hospital for treatment, and a 5th was pronounced dead on the scene. Officers still actively searching, they say, for the suspect and any other victims. That was another part that they added since the last update, that they're also looking for any additional victims. And they say based on their investigation, the photos that they have released appear to be of that active shooter, of the person they're actively searching for. And again, police updating us now, 5 victims, 1 is confirmed to be dead.
That update is significant, even as Cody was just mentioning to us that the medical SWAT team members are there kind of on standby. Certainly the hope is that there aren't any other additional victims. Again, as Cody mentioned, we can confirm police saying no additional shots have been fired since the initial shooting that happened right around 12:47 today. No shots fired since that point, but now we know that there are 5 victims total, 1 dead, and we have that medical SWAT team on standby, hoping that they are not needed as they're looking to bring this man into custody. We'll show his picture again soon, because it's very important this picture gets out. If someone recognizes him and makes a call, that could lead perhaps to the one piece of information they need to find this person. If you haven't seen this picture before, or if you have, take a closer look. These are the 4 images that Atlanta police are sharing with us of the person they say is responsible for the death of
Now I got
1
slide parts
and
coming
4
in
being
for
injured in the
19.
shooting today. This is the best picture right here without his mask on. They are looking for this person. Think he may still be in that area of Midtown, hiding somewhere.
Yeah, we do have multiple reporters on the scene, including 11 Alive's Karis Belcher. Karis, what are you seeing where you are right now?
Is responsible for the death of 1 and 4 being injured in the shooting today. This is the
Just like
best
a
picture
courier
right
pouch
here
he's
without
got.
his mask on. They are looking for this person. Think he may still be in that area of Midtown, hiding somewhere.
Yeah, we do have multiple reporters on the scene.
This is more than likely going to be handgun.
Again, we're on 13th Street. You see
More
some
than likely
officers' cars
robbery.
coming through here. We've also seen some people trying to walk through, getting as much information as possible, because again, this is a quickly moving situation. We're actually right not by the Northside Medical Shipping and Receiving entrance that has been blocked off with tape. And I can also tell you that there have been people who work at some of the surrounding buildings who have started to come out trying to get some more information. And not too long ago, I spoke with a gentleman who works inside the Northside Medical Building. He said around lunchtime, around noon, he was told by his supervisors
Yeah,
to
that's
leave
what
the
just
building.
hearing.
He wasn't
5
given much
shot,
more
had another one
information.
die.
In fact, when I asked him what else he knew, he said nothing, only that he was told to leave, and he did not know he would be allowed back in the building. So that should give you a sense of how quickly things have changed around here. Again, there are some people from some of the surrounding buildings walking around as police are trying to redirect things and move their perimeter in their continued search. An officer did speak to me not too long ago. He said that we should anticipate getting information soon, but right now officers are really trying to move things around and keep them contained so everyone is safe, because as you mentioned, they are still looking for someone.
Karis, you know, I see those people behind you leaving that appear to be
Jesus.
civilians, and we just heard from our crews on the ground that Northside Hospital staff are currently, at the same time, police are saying that the suspect.
All right, so just got the word. I just heard over the announcements on PAs or Pennsylvania's stuff. They're in recess until 2 now, so they keep extending it and extending it and then extending it. It's like extendo recess. Come, they never did that crap when I was a kid. Hey, we're extending recess. Let's see something. Let's back up and see if we can find. Fox 5 is local in Atlanta. So let's see what they're saying.
Area because we still had kind of a steady stream of traffic here at 12th and West Peachtree, but I have noticed that we're not seeing as much as that as we were initially seeing. Also, people who simply have been trying to make their way home. You know, folks who live in some of these high rises, as well as having business here, who have been redirected at this point because this is still a very dangerous situation. A lot of
Yeah, you got all
unknowns
sorts of
here
businesses
as the
there.
search
You got
continues for this
freaking
suspect, Alex.
Yeah, DJ, you mentioned
apartment
a very
buildings,
important point, which is that these are
hotels.
people's loved ones that they're just now hearing about on the news. There's no indication of who the victims were or how they're doing. We do know one person is dead. 4 other people have been taken to the hospital. Now, we
Yeah,
did
more
just
likely,
gather
Sam.
an
Yeah, Atlanta
interview with a
freaking
witness. Let's
their
listen to
mayor's
what
probably
that
already
person
trying to get some more
experienced.
gun laws together.
It just makes me
Is it
wonder,
clause against
where
murder
is
or
he?
not?
It could be any one of us, not any one of us, but it could be anybody out here right now, and we don't really know who's the shooter.
Yeah, that's the scary part about all of this is that right now we're all just in limbo. The people who are waiting down there in Midtown, they're all just wondering if it's even safe to be there. Right now, the answer is no. And your best bet is to stay inside, whether that's your apartment, condo, home, or business, to let Atlanta police do their job and find the suspected shooter. You're looking at officers on your screen now with what appears to be their weapons drawn. We've seen similar images all throughout the past, now going on about an hour. We first heard about this maybe the last 15 minutes of the noon hour, and Atlanta police have swarmed this area, really just looking for the suspect. Let's bring that image up for those of you who haven't seen it just yet. It does show a man with a hoodie, in some instances with a mask on and a backpack across his stomach or
handgun.
chest. This is the person that Atlanta police say they are searching for. This is the person who is said to have shot 5 people.
Yeah, that's what it looks like.
One of
So it's either robbery or gang
Let's go ahead
related.
and
I damn
check
near
in
bet
with
money on that.
one of the reporters who's on the scene here. Again, Atlanta police first told us about this around noon. Here's more of those images live from the air of Atlanta police gathering at a corner, trying to get a sense of where that suspected shooter might be. We do know this is a collaborative effort. We have heard that the Georgia State Patrol is also looking into this. You see multiple
Oh man, they're gonna have everybody
agencies that
looking
appear
into
to
that
have
shit.
tactical gear on the
But
ground.
that dude is more
This
than
is a map
likely
to give
out
you
of
an
that
idea of
area.
where exactly this is. Let's check in with Fox 7's Rob DiRienzo. Rob, what do you see now?
I don't know what this dude is talking about, but yeah, this shooter's probably out of the area already, man. He's probably freaking gone. He'd have to be super dumb still supposed if he's still chilling around in that area somewhere. Wubba. Runny nose. Fist bumps. Up high fist bump. All right. Boy, you silly. Ooh, hey, is there a hottie on the swatty? She'll poke her face out. She'll be an absolute troll. Man, I was driving a van full of people through downtown Atlanta one time, down right by the Fulton County Courthouse. And we drive right past Fulton County Courthouse. Stopped at a light right there, and you hear these guys, and they're all going off. These cops had this guy over searching him. They're like, oh, leave him alone, leave him alone, leave him alone. Why are you messing with him? And that cop pulled a bag of crack out of that guy's back pocket and went, because you can't bring crack in the Fulton County Courthouse. They had him cuffed and stuff, man. Apparently he was in there for an arraignment or something. Had a big ass bag of dope on him. And he got caught. You ain't dealing with the criminal masterminds a lot of times. Yeah, man, I've driven all those streets. And don't want to drive them no more. Yeah, dude. Atlanta, man, it's which any of the cities. Freaking little old city I'm sitting in right now, Columbus, Georgia. About, 80, 90 miles south of there? This little town right here turns into little Beirut, man. They start shooting out here sometimes acting like ammo prices didn't go up. Of course, hell, they're stealing their ammo more than likely, so it ain't like they're footing the bill. Oh. Which hell, it's also why, I need to. I come over here and look. Of course, I'm working on guns and shit too, but I come over here and look out for my folks' place because I don't trust any of these motherfuckers. The old damn meth head walking past the house this morning. I was sitting on the porch about 7-something drinking coffee. He was already wired tight. What are you doing? What?
Today is
Boy. Let's see. What's my man here saying?
Inside that medical building, I believe we've lost them. They were running away from the scene. They said that they were a floor under and they heard several gunshots. They didn't want to go on camera, but they were, you could tell, visibly upset. I'm sure they had to stay there and shelter in place. 2 women, and they were in scrubs as they left this area. It's been a very long and unexpected day for them. I also want to just point you over there. I know it's a very active scene, but you can see Atlanta police going inside this Shell gas station. That has really caught my eye. This gas station, the inside is closed, and we've seen several different officers going inside, looking at what looks like video, but they really, a lot of different officers have made their way inside this Shell gas station here. You can just see a lot more police officers coming in. You see people probably coming back from lunch, and they can't make their way to where their offices are, but it really did stand out. We saw those 2 women leaving the crime scene tape. They didn't want to talk on camera, but they said they were the floor under where all of this happened, and what they describe as a medical center, and they said they just heard several gunshots. Again, we just saw a SWAT team with the Fulton County pull up. It took a left street up. That's probably 13th or 12th Street, which is going over to where the action is. And then my photographer is showing you really where a lot of the hub of activity is as well. So you can see
Where's
they're
the
gathered
shooting?
here
At
up
the
at
medical
North
center?
Peachtree and 14th Street, as it looks like people are starting to leave who might have been inside. Again, this is coming from the interviews that we've gotten here of a medical center. It looks like as well. But we're just, just trying to figure out exactly
Some dude trying
what
to cap
is
his old
going
lady or some
on
dude sleeping
here.
with his old lady.
Okay, there's a lady who looks like she's in some sort of medical thing. She turned back to kind of head the different direction, but it looks like a lot of people who might be coming from where that shooting might have taken place might be released at this point, as I'm currently at 14th and Spring. Alex, we'll continue to try to see who we can talk to out here, but again, understandably, we want to give them their space as well, as this is a traumatic event that no one imagines on a Wednesday around noontime to go through.
Yeah, Eric, thanks. It sounds like police are canvassing the area. You mentioned they headed toward that Shell gas station where you are on 14th Street. Deidre even mentioned Atlanta police often talk about their resources, that camera connecting system. They say this is the reason why they so often want all of those businesses to connect so that they can tap in during a moment like this. We're getting another image from the sky here, trying to get a sense of where Atlanta police are focusing their investigative efforts right now. That camera is sort of just locating, scanning, trying to see where police are focusing all of their energy. We do know that people are trying to find that one suspect that we've been showing you images of with the gray hoodie, with what appears to be a backpack across his stomach. We know, Christine, you've been here noticing all of this.
I'm here on set with you, Alex. Christine Spiro here, as you're looking at these images of this suspect. And I wanted us to go back to those images because it's really telling. You bring up the issue with surveillance cameras and having access to those. And you can see in the picture on the left there, the suspect pointing his weapon in whose direction we don't know, obviously, but clearly this person is armed and dangerous.
I'll tell you what, guys, I'm
not
gonna go
been
ahead and end this
caught
one
at
here.
this hour, but
I
it's
gotta run
pretty
out. I gotta pick up
startling
my daughter.
and striking to see that this surveillance did
running around.
capture this suspect potentially in action here.
Anyway,
Sadly, we've been telling you there have been 5 total victims here. One person we do know has lost their lives, but with this person being still at large, he clearly is armed. So this is not a situation where you want to approach this person, but it's just so critical to have the public's help in situations like this, because in the last shooting that happened, sadly,
I thought about
it
letting
was
it
the
run,
help
but who
of
the
the
hell
public
knows?
who was able to identify
Y'all take
that
it easy. I
they
might start
spotted
something
this
up back here
woman
later.
in that case
Maybe
who
I'll be able
was
to track down
arrested
what
eventually
CPD does with their
for
shit later
causing
on
that
today.
active shooting last year in Midtown.
I'm
But
out, guys.
here
Love
again,
each
as you're
and every
looking
one
at
of you.
these
Y'all be
images,
cool.
we can't show this to you enough of this individual that authorities are looking for, where